At the Marie, Roger. Nice to see you.
Nā mihi ki a koe hoki, Mel.
Sure. Last meeting for the year. Let's make it a goodie. Morena. Two Roger Titchborns on here.
Wait till the third one turns up.
Morena Daryl. Roger number 3.
Sorry, what in the Meredith? This is Tal Hirschfeld with us. Running to here.
Kia ora, Morena.
Everyone, and welcome to our council meeting. I ask that you stand and join me for a karakia. Dear God, thank you for bringing us together here today. It is fantastic that we've come to the end of this year. So much has happened. I ask that you guide us in our decision making today, and let we always keep the best for our community at the front of mind. God, please protect us and guide us as we all go out and spend time with our whānau. Some of us might travel. Please keep us safe. We all deserve a good break this summer. It's been a tough year for everyone, not just here in Gisborne and Aotearoa, but across the world. Thank you for always looking over us, and we ask this in your name. Amen. Okay. Do I have any apologies? None. So I do want to welcome everyone today. This is our last council meeting of the year. For those watching the live stream, thank you for being with us. You will have to go without your weekly fix of council meetings for the next 6 weeks, but we'll be back at the end of January. We have a very interesting, even though it's not a huge agenda today, lots of interesting agenda items which we will discuss. So please stick with us. Any declarations of interest? Yes, Meredith Akuhata Brown have an interest. She texted her interest through to me. Meredith, the floor is yours.
Atamari e koutou. I made a submission to the traffic bylaw hearings, so I'm just declaring that. There's been a little bit of interest in my declaring that today, so I just want to say I made a submission. Kia ora.
All good. So Meredith just declared she submitted to the traffic bylaw. Thank you for that, Meredith. Okay, we move into our agenda. Confirmation of our non-confidential minutes. That's page 5, councillors. Moved by Councillor Burdett. Seconded by Councillor Faulkner. Any questions or queries in regards to our first set of minutes? Yes, Councillor Seymour.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I have a few questions for updating. So it's on page 7, item 10.1, and it's the very bottom. It's adopting the recommendation of the RTC around the transport of children to school, and it was not the last RCT meeting, but the one before. And we said well, we would look for a partner that might help fund that so that all transport to high school kids could be free. So is there an update? It's 3A on that page, please. We were to work with other parties.
Mr.
like
Wilson.
DP, like that.
Through your worship, we have been talking with Trust After just very briefly, and we've been more talking with Waka Kotahi and Ministry of Education if there's anything we can do there.
Thank you. Further, Madam Chair, I do have 2 or 3. On the same page at 11.1, identifying buildings still to be earthquake strengthened. Could we have please have a report on what buildings are still to be earthquake strengthened? Because EP&R used to follow that quite closely, and we would know how many needed to be, who still remain to be strengthened, and what the time frame around them was. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Seymour. Noted. Thank you. Councillor Worsnop.
Thank you. Just sticking with page 7.2C, we were intending to obtain advice regarding the wreck insurance and who was holding which responsibility with regards to the port and ourselves. Do we have any further clarity on that? And then
No,
sorry, then I've just got.
through your worship, no, we will bring a paper on that in the new year.
Oh, thank you. And just on page 8, just to clarify where the discussion on Three Waters is itemised, there's a point there which says that the case for change has not been demonstrated. And I just know the import of that meeting was not so much the case for change, it was the case for that particular change. Just to clarify that. The case for change in its current form was what we were resistant to, rather than change per se.
Change the case for change in its current
form. Just because the minutes of that meeting are likely to form an evidence base for whatever happens.
So people happy to just add those words in its current form? All councillors happy with that? Thank you, Joel.
Cool. Is page 11 still part of these minutes?
Page 13, yeah, we go to page 14 for this one.
So on page 11, just also to clarify that where we refer to the 14% water loss, it's actually an estimate, it's not known.
All in favour? Contrary, carried. We move to our next set of minutes, councillors. It's page 15. Thank you, Councillor Burdett. Any questions in regards to our extraordinary council meeting where we mostly discussed the representation review? If not, do I have a seconder? Councillor Faulkner, all in favour? Contrary, carried. So I'll just carry on to our action sheet, page 24. Thank you for the updates on there. I wanted to add to action point 1 that Diane and myself attended the unveiling of the 88 headstones there were 88 unveilings. And it was a beautiful day, lots of whānau there. People read the names that could still be read on the headboards, and some of the family said some words. It was a really touching day. So I do want to thank our staff and Virimu also for being involved there. It was much appreciated. Thank you. Anything else in the action sheet? It all looks to me updated or in progress. So thank you for that. And then we just have our work plan. I don't have any leave of absence, acknowledgement and tribute. So Roger, we welcome you today to our meeting. Thank you for, I can also see Daryl, everyone's name, Roger Titchborn on my screen. So I can spot Daryl there. Welcome, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours. You wanted to just touch base with us again. As you know, we do have a paper on our agenda today. So once we have done a little bit more of admin, we will get to your paper and you can listen into our discussion. So the floor is yours. Thank you, Roger.
Kia ora tātou katoa. Nā mihi ki a koe hoki o ngā kaimahi o te kaunihera o te tai rāwhiti. Karanga mai mihi mai, Ioana, I roti I tēnei hui. With me is Daryl Naden and Charles Hirschfeld, senior lawyer for our Marina Coastal area. And I won't take up too much time on that report because they're more expert than I in presenting those things we noted within your report. So without further ado, I'll hand the time now over to Daryl Naden.
Amore na mea, koutou katoa ngā mema o te kainihera o tēnei te mihi nui ki a koutou mā. So essentially we're addressing the GDC's report as I'm referring to it this morning. This is a report and we thank the GDC for turning around the response to our letter dated 25 November in such a short time frame. Very much appreciated. Absolutely acknowledged. Thank you. In terms of addressing the GDC report, I understand we've got about 15 minutes and we think that we can stick to that time frame. There's also the request to share some documents on the screen. Some of the documents, or one of the documents is some pages from the GDC report, and another document consists of the some Queen's Chain depictions in Tokomaru Bay, and so there has been that request made. I'm just hoping that we can screen share. It'll just help with the council's understanding of what's been said this morning, in my view. So just to briefly summarise what the council's set out in its report as it's understood, there was a request, or has been a request, for the return of some 191 acres of land that were taken for harbour purposes by the Waipo County Council in 1915. That request was made to the council by way of a deputation.
Hey, Carol, can I just quickly interrupt you?
Yes.
We are losing you every now and then. Can you maybe sit closer to your speaker and let's see if that improves the presentation?
Absolutely, thank you, Mia. So just by way of background, and hopefully that's a bit clearer now, there's this request for the 191 acres and taken in that way at that time. What the council has responded with is that land, or the taken land that's at or below the mean high water springs mark, this is in accordance with the MACA Act, Marine and Coastal Area, Takatama 1 Act 2011, is now part of the Common Marine and Coastal Area and is outside now. Council's been divested of that area of land. But by way of the 2011 Act, there's still adjacent land that may well be the subject of this request for the return of the land. And the best way to illustrate what I'm talking about in terms of adjacent land is to go to the figure 2 in the GDC report. Hopefully you're seeing that now on your screen. Let me scroll to figure 1 just so you can get some orientation. And this here is, you may well recognize the northern part of Tokomaru Bay, where the cursor is the jetty or wharf. And then this shaded brown area is the 191 acres, as has been discussed. And you'll see this map over here, and you may recall it's been presented to you previously, setting out the extent of the 191 acres they'll take in back in the time. And so it's accepted that what's below the mean high water spring has been divested of the council by way of the MACA Act, but there's adjacent land above the mean high water spring, in our rough estimation, that would still appear to be within the council's title as it stands. So it looks to be the case, and where I'm running the cursor along now, this brown area has been shaded, is or is not, or is in part above the mean high water springs mark, and therefore it's technically adjacent land under the 2011 Act, and as such, it's still a part of the request for the return of the land. And so what's sought is that a survey's been proposed by the council, and we thank the council in that respect. However, it's been proposed for being initiated after the High Court hearing. You may recall mention being made of the High Court hearing kicking off, I think, 5 September of 2022. Set down for 4 weeks, multiple parties involved. These days, the High Court justices are taking about 6 to 8 months to make make their decision. Then we need to go back for a second hearing with the High Court on the orders being made. And there's usually something like 6 to 12 months there. And so we're talking now about if the council's process for the survey that's been proposed is followed, it would not be carried out till something like perhaps 2024 or 2025. And we acknowledge the council's proposal for the survey, and it's grateful in that regard. However, we don't really want to appear before the High Court justice saying, oh, there's some parts of this 191 acres that's now part of the Marine and Coastal Area. And there are other parts that are adjacent land that are above the mean high water spring, but we don't know where just. It would just muddy the waters for the High Court hearing in a way that needn't be the case. And so in the GDC report, what's been proposed is that the survey be conducted after High Court orders are made, 2024, 2025, and then that survey process. We're just asking the council to look at the GDC report in this respect and consider whether there would be a willingness on the council's part to survey the whenua before the High Court hearing begins. Then we can tell the judge with accuracy as to what's within the judge's jurisdiction and what is not. Now, so there's that's being put to the council. The GDC report also refers to an offer back situation, and you may be familiar with public works legislation in this regard, where land that is now access to use or not used for the purpose that was originally taken for can be offered back to the original owners. And this is certainly set out and proposed in the GDC report, and we're grateful in that respect. However, what's been proposed is that the offer back process, should it ensue, and certainly what's been caveated by the GDC are where the taken land is still required for council purposes. And listing out there, the council's referred to the playground near the corner where State Highway 35 heads inland. It's referred to reserves and also to looks like the mouths of waterways, streams, rivers, where council was saying those are needed in relation to the council's drainage system. We understand that. So offerback's been referred to by the council in the report, but for those items of where purpose is still required. And the offerback referred to as received with gratitude. However, what's sought is that what's currently proposed by the council is the offerback process, should it ensue, is to begin, it looks like post High Court orders, again, 2024, 2025. The offerback process will involve the owners of various blocks all along, and I've got the cursor on that red area and the map in the corner there, all along the Tokomotu Bay foreshore. And so, and there are multiple blocks and there are multiple owners involved, different parent land blocks. For instance, up here, it's Tawhiti, in the middle, it's Mangahoa, and then you've got Ongāruru down here, Nuhiti, towards Te Mawhai. A lot of different blocks, a lot of different owners. The offerback process, should it ensue, will be time consuming. And what we were wanting to say to Judge is that, and if it's something the council's interested in, that there's an intent on the council's part to offer back lands that were taken, that are adjacent to the coastal marine, common marine and coastal area, no longer required for purpose. And that a process, once the survey's been done, is initiated within 2022, prior to the High Court hearing, at least initiated. And that there is perhaps an agreement in principle in this regard between parties. Some record that we can provide to the High Court Justice to say, Judge, please don't consider this land taken to be a substantial interruption, which pursuant to Section 58 of the 2011 Act could be fatal to the Macro Act applications, could be, certainly hamper those applications. But if we've got a letter of intent with that effect from the council in terms of the proposed offerback of lands that aren't still required for purpose, then that may well help the judge get over the hump of their deed on its face. It looks to be a substantial interruption to our clients and other applicant groups within this area, their applications for title to the customary marine area. So there's also this offerback situation that we're asking the council to initiate sooner rather than later. It's the essential submission. And so, but at the moment, the GDC is proposing a different timeline for both the survey and the offerback process, should it ensue. Now, just in closing, for my part, because Mr. Hirschfeld, I understand, will address the council shortly. We're doing okay with time. We're looking at the Tokomotu Bay Harbour and you'll see where the cursor is, and you'll understand that it's this area where the
Carol,
harbour.
your document that you're currently sharing is a white page. You're not on the map at this stage.
I see. Apologies.
There we
So,
go.
Mayor, is that now there?
Yes, thank you.
Righty. So where the cursor is the Tokomaru Bay Harbour area, but you'll see that the land that was taken stretches all the way down here and around the rest of the foreshore. And it's difficult to understand how this taking further and beyond the immediate harbour area was for harbour purposes. And through here past the township, Reda, and down through the rest of foreshore area, past Onaru, and so on and so forth, all taken for harbour purposes. And although harbour purposes has been interpreted widely in the past by courts, it's difficult to see how this taken land was actually specifically for that purpose. And so there's a concern that the taking of land beyond the immediate needs of the harbour board as it then was ultra vires, the act. It was not specifically for harbour purposes. In other words, it was illegal. And so having asked the council to reconsider its position in relation to when the survey is done, when the offer back process is initiated, this is final submission on the illegality or not of the taking of much of the whenua that we'd ask the council to consider as well when it's deliberating over the request that's been made by Ngā Hapuru Pukumaru Ako, and that remains on the table. And unless there are questions, that's all I have to say this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Daryl. Roger, do you have anything to add or any other queries or questions?
Yeah, just one thing to add, which pains us a lot, is a lot of the confiscations were done in the period from the 1914 to 1918 First World War, when a lot of the chiefs and leaders from Tokomaru were in the trenches overseas fighting a war. And as you will see, between 1914 and 1918, by the time the men returned, some of them, including my grandfather, come back and all his land was taken. It was gone. And so that period of time after 1918, that stopped. But during that First World War, it's painful to think this is what's happened to our people who are serving in the war. I too served in Southeast Asia, and I was away for over 2 years, and I come back home and I'm still meeting with councils and meeting with Waitangi Tribunal and the Crown to try and redress some of the issues that are taking place. So that's all I have to say, is to look at that timeline between 1914 and 1918 and how painful it has been to us. Thank you, Your Honour.
Mayor, may I just a couple of wrap-up points that I've omitted. Apologies in that regard. It looks like from our historians' records, and David Armstrong was actually the Public Works researcher for the East Coast Inquiry, that Tribunal and Waitangi Tribunal Inquiry that was deferred ultimately in 2010. David Armstrong is the historian for Ngā Hapuru Pukumaru Ako. He happened to be the historian who prepared the Public Works research takings all along the East Coast from Port Tikirua south to Gisborne to Whakataio. And David's understanding is that when the 191 acres was taken, no compensation was paid. And so if there is an offer back process, we would ask that a nominal amount be provided, say $1, in consideration for any return of land by way of the offer back process to any recipient and the successor or any successors of the original owners, that there should not be an offer back that's at cost or at market. So there's that we'd ask the council to take into consideration. I'd ask for the opportunity as well to put these submissions in a letter to council, so there's just clarity around what we're saying, and that so there's that request as well. And thank you. That was all.
Thank you for that. So at this stage, because it's a public deputation, councillors have the opportunity to ask questions. They might not have specific questions of you. They might have more questions of our staff, because we will be moving to your report next. So I will ask councillors any questions at this stage of Daryl or Roger. Tony, thank you.
Tēnā koutou. One quick question, and please, this might be mildly offensive, but it's not meant to be. Can you just confirm, please, that NHOTA is the mandated body for all affected mana whenua, and that the action, for example, if council offers land back or goes through this process as you're requesting, that you are covering all of the owners?
Absolutely no offence taken. That is an appropriate question. Set out in our letter of 25 November some of the mandating efforts that have been undertaken by NOTA, Ngā Hapu Tukumaru Ako. We confirm that Ngā Hapu Tukumaru Ako are the mandated representatives for all additional groups that are within the application area that has been filed by Ngā Hapu Tukumaru Ako in the High Court. This is from the Waimahuru stream, or at Orange Bay, just south of the Waipiro Bay, south to Te Mawhao. That entire area, we are the mandated, Ngā Hapu Tukumaru Ako are mandated, councillor, and for the council's information, there are plans to reconfirm that mandate in 2022. The mandating efforts have been carried out in accordance with the High Court's been ruling on how mandates should be done. And we've, for instance, publicly notified meetings to be held, that they've been held at public venues, local marae, Tuatini marae, and Tukumaru Bay, and at Chariuru marae. They're well attended, the attendances were documented, and information was disseminated, so on and so forth. The appropriate resolutions were put in terms of mandate at each of these meetings. And so that's what we are presenting to the High Court. And that's what we are saying to Council, that Ngā Hapu Tukumaru Ako is mandated in the manner that's.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, councillors? Meredith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for being here this morning and this continuance of conversation. My question might be troublesome, I suppose. I just wanted to know whether the sale of any property on your land currently would impact this discussion. I noted there was an auction recently regarding the Te Puka Tavern. So does that impact this discussion at all?
Yeah, I might want to answer that one, and you're right. I've taken you to that area, and I also understand that Te Puka hunting and fishing have also a right to build a building there on that site, which is right on the verge of the Wairuru stream, and many do not understand the wāhi tapu that's involved in there, and the history going back to Horauta Waka and the meanings of that whole area in Te Puka, and the Tauranga Waka Toro Chika. Why it's important to get alongside council, like you, the councillors, and we enter into joint arrangements so that all this knowledge will come forth and be combined under the one umbrella of a management plan for the Marina coastal area and other areas, so that we enter into joint partnerships, and any going forward, any cottage industries that may want to be set up by the hapu will have some council involvement, and that's how we see the future. The Te Puka Tavern with the identity that put in a bid for it is also could be a stumbling block for this for operations going forward in terms of our combined plans for the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more questions? Otherwise, what I will do is ask my colleagues if it's okay if we move the Tokomaru Bay paper, which is on page 170, to the front of our agenda while we have Roger and Daryl and David online. So I will ask our staff. So we will go to page 170, and I do want to thank you, Terina, for the paper. I know you've had a tight turnaround. So Terina, do you want to have a quick korero, just give us the council perspective from the paper, and then we'll open for questions, because I'm sure councillors will have some questions and we'll take it from there. So thank you.
Kia ora tātou and kia ora, Your Worship. Through Your Worship, it's quite a clear-cut request, and I think quite a clear paper as well in terms of what we are and are not able to do under the various types of legislation that apply to the request. I think the key thing for consideration today is around timing, and timing to pursue and investigate the options that are potentially proposed through this morning's deputation and through the summary of the paper itself, and that's around pursuing a return of the land. Kia ora, I think I'll leave it there and allow you guys to consider and ask any questions.
Thank you. Understand the paper, and it is a good paper. Personally, I feel like 100 years of evidence supersedes the need for thorough investigation and whether there's practical use for that land. It's been sitting there unused for so long that it's evident that we don't have a use for it. However, I understand there's process around that. So I believe that we're in a position where we could make a principled statement on our intention for the land and allow the process to continue, where we would say that council has intention to divest of the land back to the original owners post surveying and assessment, so that we understand what lots can be released, so that we've at least made the intent known. But I understand that to do this work before April 2022 is not budgeted. It is not in our it is not in a plan that we would be able to implement properly. So I think from my point of view, the best we can do is a statement that aligns to release that land and to do that process in the future.
Thank you. Pat, oh my goodie, look at all these hands. Next is Tony, then it's Larry.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the report, which is really comprehensive. Thank you to the gentlemen that have appeared on screen today. It is quite comprehensive. We've had further information given to us this morning, and Madam Chair, I'm happy to move the report as it stands. And thank you for the work that's been done, and Gisborne District Council officers have indicated what should happen next. So I move the report as it is. Notes the content of the report.
Councillor Robinson, then Foster, then Wharehinga.
Excellent report from staff, and again, a really comprehensive, well-reasoned presentation from Ngā Hapu. So I support, as Councillor Dowsing has suggested, that we don't dilly-dally around on this. It's not hard to make a decision to offer the land back or not. The steps that decision will then instigate, such as investigating whether the land is required for other public use purposes, staff can get on with that, and that can be budgeted. But what I hear our deputation asking is by April 2022 that they can be in a position to go to the High Court and say, we have a letter of support from council that will offer the land back to us. To me, that's a no-brainer. So I'm not sure if we can achieve that today or whether we have to bring that back in February, but I would urge both staff and my colleagues that we do progress that within the timeframes asked by the submitters this morning, and then we can get on with determining the cost of survey and the other questions that flow from that.
Thank you. Just before Councillor Foster speak, can you just comment on, before we carry on, the letter that we of the statement of principled support? Can it be just a letter? or you know what I'm trying to ask, are there work that needs to go in behind it to get to that, or can it just be a statement from us? So comment on that.
Kia ora, Your Worship. Through Your Worship, I think as Councillor Dowsing noted, a statement of intent could be issued through a letter. I think the issue is that there's multiple applicants. And so one of the risks or cautions that we advised in the report is that we don't influence the proceedings. And so if you did do a letter, it would probably be wise and fair to issue a statement of intent to pursue a return of land to the successors and not necessarily identify a specific applicant group. And then the High Court, through their proceedings, can take that into account, but not necessarily influence the proceedings. I don't know if that would.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to move that if this, if the noting was to fail, I'll move that we draft a letter of support.
Councillor Foster, Wharehinga, Borbadit. Wharehinga, Borbadit.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I te tuatai kia koutou, kia tokumaru ākou. Ngā kanohi o ngā hapu o tokumaru ākou nei rata mihi nunui kia koutou. Karanga mai te Awarerangi, karanga mai a Rua Taupare, nei rata mihi nunui kia koutou mō koutou kōrero e pāna ki tēnei kaupapa. Thank you very much for your guys' deputation in regards to this kaupapa. Yeah, I want to stand to speak in support of what Councillor Dowsing has proposed in light of the context that staff are recommending. You're absolutely right. There is this intention around the table to do the right thing, but we need to be very structured and follow through the process that has already kind of been undertaken in order to do the right thing. I absolutely agree that we should be, where possible, we should be divesting whenua back to mana whenua where those and in what way those functions are decided, and in what way those names, those hapu groups, etc., are decided. Those are kind of outside of our hands. However, we do, within our hands, we do have the ability to support the intention to do this in the future, and I absolutely do support that. And in light of Councillor Seymour's firstly not having a second, I'll second your recommendation of noting this report, and then also I'll let you provide the wording around the how we provide the statement there. So I just wanted to stand in regards to that. Thank you.
It's already been seconded, but thank you for, did you second what Shannon moved?
Yeah.
Yep, so Tony seconded that, but that's all good. Bill Badit. You can sit. But you need to move your microphone, they can't hear you.
Hey, ngā mihi ki a koe, Bill.
Hi, long time no see.
Hey.
Hey, in principle, I support this. It's a very complex issue, and you fellas know that. It's not going to happen overnight. So you've heard some of my colleagues here who are in general support. The clarity that the court requires, well, that's for you fellas to satisfy. I'm supporting our staff on this one. It's a noting report, and you'll get there eventually. Bye-bye.
Thanks for that. Meredith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou, anō. For me, we're in a very privileged space, I believe, as governance in this rohe at this time, and I endorse and support Councillor Dowsing and Wharehinga and Robinson's acknowledgement that we, at this space and time, what is our role and our duty here as councillors? I was recently in a hui that asked the question, how do we enable or empower hapu iwi mana whenua as governance people? And this, to me, gives us opportunity to show up that, yes, the process is, it's tiresome. It's a lot of work, a lot of reading, a lot of legislation, law requirements, and I just really appreciate that I've learned so much more about Tokomaru Bay through this historian, this fabulous person who gave me the chance to listen. So today, in endorsing and sharing that we're not wanting to hear words about influencing, but to some degree we want to influence change. We want to influence better, I guess, process, and if a letter of endorsement or support or acknowledgement of previous law and the way things were done and moving forward for our region, I would just be very proud of us if we simply said that we know there's a process. We don't want to be doing anything illegal, but it's time for change in these spaces. Our people in our region deserve it. So I wholeheartedly support us working however we can in this space to help and support our iwi brothers and sisters, our people who are wanting to do some things that are quite special and significant to them and their hapu. So I want to support the motion that Councillor Dowsing has already put, that whilst it's a noting report, I would like us to support with a letter, but in the right manner, of course, but certainly pushing back to a process that does frustrate, and it's time to kind of to push back, I believe, in this space. So thank you, Madam Mayor. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Worsnell.
Yeah, thank you.
No, you cannot sit.
Oh, why not?
Only Bill. Only my favourites can sit. I only have one favourite.
I'm wounded. I agree. It's fairly straightforward. The report is clear. I would just like to clarify, for probably the sake of the public who will have an interest in this, that they be able to note that public access to the beach shouldn't be impinged by this process being resolved as foreseen. Is that the case?
Yeah, we have we've noted that in our meetings when we get into joint management arrangements, that'll come to the fore. That's why we're speaking of joint management, because never before has such a team like you sitting before me now have been desirable of wrongs to be corrected, and you have a lot of youth on your side there. Apart from my whanaunga Bill there, Bill, you've been around a long time, but you steady the ship. You're the keel of the waka, so this is an opportunity for us to go forward as one ko tahitanga ki a tātou katoa I tūtuki pai ai ki ngā moi au e tūmana kōtia nei e tāta, to go together as one and reflect the sun that comes up in the morning and sets in the afternoon over te tai rāwhiti. That's what it means, te tai rāwhiti, tying us together.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, mate, can I add that in the letter of 25 November, we submitted, there's a statement around continuation of public access, and by the way, the legislation of 2011 Act prohibits any attempt to prohibit public access in the provisions of that Act.
Thank you.
Address that matter.
Thank you. Any last questions?
No, could we have the phrase that Council Officer recommended? Because I'm happy for it to be 1 and 2, but it would be good to have the wording that
we will have the wording before we. Any other questions, queries? Madame CEO.
So we propose the wording be that agrees, so 2, agrees that the council will provide a generic statement of support that will offer back the Tokomaru Bay land historically taken for harbour purposes to the successors where possible and practical.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that with the initial recommendation. To have that included with the movement.
We just have to clarify what's the purpose of the where possible and practicable? Is it to take into account the lease obligations, et cetera, et cetera? Just thinking through it legally, I would have thought that we just offer it back without that caveat, because that's a given that those obligations, that legal leases, et cetera, will have to be taken into account as to what land can be offered back. But I just don't want that to be used as a catch crawl that then just gives more and more reasons why we can't offer it back.
I'm comfortable with the wording of the mover as a mover, but we've got time before April 2022 to draft this and have it come back past council. So if it would be possible, can we please have this in our February meeting to give us the drafted letter that we will approve?
Thank you. Okay, councillors, so I'm not going to reread that. Jill, you comfortable? You caught those words? Get it from. I have a mover and councillor Dowsing. I have a seconder and councillor Robinson. So it's noting the report and then also writing that letter, which hopefully will get to us in February, and we will sign that off. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Roger, I thank you for joining us today. You and Daryl and your team, thank you for working with our team collaboratively, and we wish you a Merry Christmas. And we hope you get time to have a good break, and we will catch up in the new year.
Okay. Ka pai. Nā mihi ki a koe hoki whānau.
Thank you.
Mauri ora.
Take care. Okay, councillors, we now go to the front of our agenda. We are going to our page 27, committee recommendations. I just see on page 29, those recommendations should be 1 and 2, not 1 and 1. On the top of page 29, that should just be 2. Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair, while we're at it, on page 30, they are not the minutes of the hearing committee, but the decision of the hearing committee. The minutes of the hearing committee and council officers will support that, actually appear on docs on tap. It's just the heading and it said minute decision, and then it says minutes, and you can see if you read them, they're not the minutes, they're the council, they're my report, the report of the bylaw hearing committee.
So I want to, so since you've had the hearings committee, I've received extensive feedback through my office about the proposal 11, not to allow or not to push all traffic onto the state highway, but to allow traffic to come down Ormond Road. And if I say extensive, a lot of phone calls, lots of emails, lots of concern shared about that. So now's the time to discuss that, because you were there, we weren't there, we did see the reports, but it's just looking at it, it doesn't make sense to me to go against the council, the staff recommendation. So I thought I would just open the floor and ask the committee members that were part of that, or Councillor Seymour, you as the chair, just to share with us the thinking on the day and the feedback, because just looking at it from my perspective doesn't make sense.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'm certainly encourage the other members of the panel to make comment. It's interesting that you've had a lot of feedback, because in actual fact, the decision hasn't been reported until it came here, apart from the report, which was in the Gisborne Herald, which was taken from the actual submission. So that wasn't a report of the decision. So it is quite interesting. I mean, I did have 2 phone calls from 2 people. And you've seen some of that, and it was actually contrary to what you're saying. So the decision report, I trust that you've all read, and you will see the reasons. What you don't have contained within the material here is actually the material from Whakakotahi. And in the actual, if we're going to need to speak to the whole thing to give you the complete contents, in our material that came before the bylaws committee was a letter, a reference to a letter from Whakakotahi to this council dated the 20th of October 2020, and it was referred to within material that Whakakotahi put before us in the bylaw, and it made it really clear that there's no funding for council from Whakakotahi in the 21 to 24 annual budget or 3-year budget. And they drew again then in their comments quite significant concerns about why we could proceed to go ahead without any modification to the intersections, which is what the concerns are, that there was no funding for modification to the intersections that would be impacted if one tried to take all of the trucks off Ormond Road. So that would be the most significant, and I mean, apart from other submissions, and Councillor Akahara Brown, who's on screen and declared an interest, and one or two others supported that position that we had taken to not, or the position we were thinking of taking, to not put all the traffic onto one road. Interesting enough, another submitter who actually lived in Ormond Road said that he didn't think it was right and proper for everyone to share, have all of the traffic put through in one route. But council officers who were supporting the committee are also on screen, so can add anything. But in the first instance, I'd like to give either of the panelists the opportunity to give some feedback. The rest of the, I think there was one other point that was slightly different to what the initial officer's report was, and that was with respect to prohibiting vehicles on unformed roads and beaches. And you'll see that's there at point 5. But I have to tell you that it would seem to the committee to be completely remiss to endeavour to introduce a bylaw without the work of safety being done at the intersections. And that's the key point, that there's no money for it. It's not going to be funded by Whakakotahi in 21 to 24 year. So we would be impacting on the safety issues if no work could be done in that period. Thank you.
I just want to make one comment and then I'll zip it. That though, to me, I thought as a council, we were trying to get most traffic onto State Highway 35, which Whakakotahi would then need to look after. It feels to me and we do say there's no money in that budget, but what will happen now is that we will have to spend ratepayer money to do up Ormond Road and do repairs there all the time. So I'm just trying to balance those two in my mind. Let's listen to the committee first, and I'll give everyone an opportunity just to share their feedback. Councillor Wharehinga and Councillor Foster. So we had Councillor Seymour chair our committee, and Councillor Wharehinga and Councillor Foster sat on our behalf. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Line safety concerns in regards to the Awapuni route and those. So I won't I won't repeat those. What I do want to acknowledge is that the bylaw is not saying that now these routes are going here. It's saying that that according to the community feedback, everyone had agreed that that heavy traffic shouldn't be going on the little arterial routes, etc., etc. So in the hearings committee decision, we acknowledge that there are 2 main routes and that there's actually safety concerns, there's ambiguity around how these should be going. There's disagreement around sight lines in terms of people that have been submitted or that have submitted to this. And we recognize that moving forward, we have the ability to be able to form up the restriction around one of those routes or create an entirely different route or something moving forward via our resolution register. So we've said that this is the bylaw. On the whole, it's really good. This part here in regards to heavy traffic, particularly trucks coming into the port, is the very complex, really difficult part. This is the part that requires more time for us to discuss with NZTA, with our staff to provide us with really robust information in order to be able to pick the routes, to be able to discuss the future safety planning and increasing of infrastructure on roads with NZTA and the budgeting. We felt that it would be irresponsible for us to pick a spot where there was no indication of funding, there was no indication of future planning, there was no information in regards to certain parts that we could have. Well, we would be able to feel that we would have certainty on one or either of those routes. So saying yes to these 2 routes isn't saying that this is the way forever. It's saying actually the majority of this bylaw is really good. Let's get this through. This is the main way that heavy traffic engages with the port. Let's make those 2 spaces permissive while making all the other spaces banned ways of leading heavy traffic through our city, through our region. And let's work on this moving forward. Like we had actually made the statement as the hearings committee to say we need to firm this up with stakeholders, with NZTA, with our partners in order to be able to land this safely. So for that's all I'm really going to say in regards to this. It was based on the information that we had available at the time, that there wasn't clarity around these two routes. There wasn't security around these two routes. So therefore these two routes are still the two routes, and we've restricted all of the other little traffic ways through. So, you know, trucks can't go down Crawford Road now, which lots of people were against. Trucks can't be zipping down Anzac Road now, which we heard in our feedback from the Awapuni School, from an Awapuni School parent that submitted to us, that's also an issue for him. So we've restricted those things. We now need to do some work in regards to these other two routes. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Councillor Foster, and then we'll start here with Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that's Councillor Forringer and Councillor Seymour have reiterated everything. But you know, the important thing really is that the intersections that are going to be used, if we are eventually going to have a one route system, route system, and be it state highway, there's so much work needs to be done, and the most critical one actually is the port access, and you know, that's at Harini Street and Wainui Road, and Wakatahi have taken that off their program until 2024 for funding, which is that is the critical intersection to make this whole thing work. So without that support, I guess we need to rally Wakatahi to try and reiterate that again, to get reinstate that funding and the emphasis put onto that intersection, because that's really critical. But all the intersections leading to the port are so important for the traffic flow. So you know, that was one of the other reasons as well. So it can be changed later on down the track. Once it's in the resolution register, we can look at it and move forward.
Thank you for that. Councillor Worsnell.
Yeah, I want to just push back a little bit against the idea that without the safety or the funding being available for safety, that in fact you can't have a bylaw, because the rationale that I was given twice in the Regional Transport Committee by Waka Kotahi was that you could not have investment in the Regional Land Transport Plan scheduled when you didn't have a bylaw. You would be preempting the outcome of the bylaw. So we've got a chicken and egg situation apparently. We've also got heavy traffic on Awapuni Road that will continue without investment, and now we don't have a case for investment. So I think that we've been done over a little bit here by the people that we actually need on our side to invest in at least a route somewhere, because the traffic is going to get, even if we don't confine it to one road, it is still going to elevate on a road that is already very dangerous. So I'm quite frustrated. I can see where you're coming from, those of you who sat on this committee, but this was raised in regional transport. It's not unexpected that we have a bylaw. It was proposed a lot, it was consulted on. It was obvious that it would need investment.
Councillor Faulkner. Councillor Faulkner, make sure you use your microphone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had the privilege of sitting in on these hearings and acknowledge the panel that allowed me to do so. For a large part of the Western rural area, you are looking at what was actually a smallish part of the consultation around the entire bylaw, and was in danger of slipping through the cracks. My response to this is a vote of thanks to the panel, who have basically allowed us the time to now take this one issue and investigate it in the order of which it deserves. Elevate it to become the issue that it is, and discuss it in the correct form. So I absolutely support the remaining two routes. It's absolutely correct that we get that heavy traffic out of the arterial centre city streets. And so no, they have my support for holding this particular discussion over to the point where we can discuss it in its correct order. Thank you.
We can discuss it, what Sandra just said. I just missed the last bit that you said, Councillor Faulkner. When did you say is the correct forum to discuss the, I missed your last comment.
All I was pointing out, Your Worship, is the fact that the panel have given us time to discuss this in its correct, in its entirety, because this is a big issue. And cramming it into this situation was not appropriate. And I think the panel have made the correct decision. That's what I was wanting to say.
Thank you. Councillor Debbie and then Shannon. Thank you. Councillor Debbie.
Thank you. If we agree to this and put those 2 roads in that register, does that then mean that we don't have to go back and consult with those people? We can just go, okay, we're going to go that way or that way. Is that correct? No. So if we agree to put this into this resolution register, we add Alpini Road and Ormond Road, does that then, when we do discuss it, we don't have to go back to anyone else to consult? Is that correct?
Mr. CEO.
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Sorry, Councillor Gregory, but it is effectively status quo with the exception of Crawford Road taken out. So we would continue down that path, or we to bring it back in terms of the option around restricting to State Highway 30, yes, to the State Highway. Then we've done the work, we've engaged on that. That was done in 2019. We would effectively be bringing back that same proposal. I think what I'm hearing from the panel is the rationale was around Waka Kotahi not having funding. So we would be having the conversation with Waka Kotahi, am I right?
Okay. Shh. Anything else?
Well, just so how do we, when, why put it in there at all if we're not going to do anything? And it seems with Kerry with frustration, because hasn't this been on the cards for about a decade to get this route organised? 20 years. And I don't understand why we're stalling now. Thank you.
Councillor Shannon. I forget your surname sometimes, Tony. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I'm going to, I'm in support of the recommendation, but only because I didn't like the outcome that was going to occur anyway. I don't think we were nearly aspirational enough in our approach to the alternative route, and I don't think we were getting the result that we desired if we were to put it in place. If you go to any other major centre and see their bypass routes, they are not the same urban roads we're driving down when our logging trucks come through our town. When you cycle over the bridge in our main street coming into the inner harbour and you go over speed like 12 speed bumps across it and they want to kick you off your bike, that is not the outcome we want. There is significant investment required in a proper route, and that isn't sorted by a bylaw. That's sorted by a better relationship with Waka Kotahi and saying, we are going to do this, get your budget in order because this is what we need. We put millions of tons of logs over these roads and you need to provide for it. And that wasn't going to be achieved overnight. It wasn't going to be achieved by our bylaw, but it has to be achieved for our community. So if we're going to have a bypass, the discussion starts now, and we're saying our bylaw is coming, whether you like it or not, make sure it is in your budgets because council will not delay again. And that's where I think our statement needs to be. And our aspirations are not for more urban streets, they are for proper state highway, the equivalent of our neighbouring regions. Thank you.
Councillor Sheldrake.
Thank you. And I just want to really thank people who put the work in and got us to here, but our port couldn't be in a worse location for taking massive trucks. The increase in the number of trucks, we see 3 cranes here now. There one stage here, no cranes, and the volume is just going to be ridiculous. And I actually agree with what Councillor Dowsing just said. I think this is a stop. Sorry, reposition. This is the budget required to make this thing happen. We can't have these things rumbling down all through our city.
Councillor Purdy, microphone.
Well, I'm total agreement with Terry, but thanks to the hearings committee and the good work they've done. You know, this issue has been here with council since I arrived. With the old assets committee, on former council, full councils, 3 CEOs and now Nadine. And we still haven't resolved it. Terry's right, we need to be sitting down with the Transport Agency with the thought that we're going to enact a bylaw and that we want them. I mean, think about the access into the port. It was supposed to go underground 15 years ago, nothing. So I'm in the position where I think we need to pause, have a good reflection on where we are, and sit down with those people in Wellington, those bureaucrats who bang us against the wall all the time in terms of funding. Their priorities are not our priorities, despite them sitting here telling us they are. So from where I sit, I'm in total support that we pause this.
I will give you a right of reply. Councillor Robinson, thank you.
I support all aspects of the report, bar the decision to commit heavy traffic to Ormond and Awapuni Road. The rationale raised by Councillor Worsnop is very sound. If we put this into the basket of we'll sort it later on, we've got to sort this later on. This corridor has been around for 20 years, as Papa Bill's just said. We actually need to define it now. We have the expert reports, the staff reports, the information, the safety information, which says actually a single route, Awapuni Road, is the one to go for. Now, what I suggest is we actually put that in the paper and we vote on that as an amendment. And then if we want to come up with an absolutely alternate route, as Councillor Dowsing has suggested, we start that mahi, but that mahi would be a decade long because we know Gisborne, there is no alternate route unless you're going to take the railway corridor or something like that, but that's not going to happen overnight. And we cannot let the status quo continue because we need to sort it later on. We need to say now, actually, the safety rationale, the cost rationale, the only barrier it seems to be raised by the committee was that Waka Kotahi said it's not their budget. Well, if we say this is the bylaw we're making and this is the route we're taking, their budget will have to be made to fit it. It is a state highway, they fund it 100%. And if we've got any brains in saving our ratepayers' money, we will take heavy trucks off a road which we subsidise 30x cents in the dollar on. So I support the report, but I don't support the decision to route through both Ormond Road and Awapuni Road. I only support Awapuni Road as the heavy traffic route.
I will give you right of reply because I have one more question. I've just looked at some of the emails I received and just one which I think all councillors received as well, but because I wasn't at the hearing, you can shed light on the decision making just around the Harper Road, King Road, where one of them is recommended. I've swapped my names now. The one that's recommended is King or Harper? Harper. So Harper is a small, there are schools there, a school, and then the other one apparently, and you've seen that email, has had work done since 1980 to make that wider and strengthened. So I just wanted to ask how that came about, because I also received quite a bit of feedback on that decision. So if it, Chris, would you like to comment on that? I just received quite a bit of feedback, and which we received throughout our consultation time as well, about Harper Road being the proposed route versus King Road, when there certain submitters were part of work way back that were done to King Road to make it wider, and the assumption was that that would be that arterial there. So can you just talk to us about that? Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, sure. Through your worship, the submission came through from a former councillor, excuse me, mostly regarding the work that was done in the 1990s to decide which routes would be best, and then some strengthening work was undertaking as we understand it. However, that decision was then reviewed through a regional development fund in the late 1990s to early 2000s, and the Assets Committee decided to go with Harper Road, because King Road, where it joined State Highway 2, had some very limited sight lines, and correction of State Highway 2 was going to be much harder than upgrading of Harper Road. The record on this was very hard to find, but there were staff members who were around at the time. I think Dave Wilson may be able to shed some more light on this. He might understand the decision process a bit better than I do.
Mr. Wilson. Handed the hospital pass.
So through your worship, there are a number of options that can be done for both King or Harper Road. I would say, as the asset owner, we would have issues with King's Road regardless, because the works that were done back in the 80s are still not, 90s, sorry, are not going to be able to hold up to heavy vehicles over the top of them anyway. We'd have to do a full rip and remake of that road if for either of the options across the Poverty Bay Flats. If you've driven them recently, you all know there's quite a high water table in winter. The trucks that are going over them now, they're already falling apart. So if it was to become a heavy vehicle crossing across the Poverty Bay Flats, we have to do some serious work to upgrade those roads, regardless of which road is picked.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson also in that email talks about a floodplain. Let me just see.
That's what Mr.
Flooding
Wilson just
happened. I didn't hear you talk. Oh yeah, Eastgate assessment, flooding. That's something that was taken into account as well.
A high water table.
So through your worship, there are a number of issues on the Poverty Bay Flats when it comes to flood waters. So when we talk about waters, that's ponding that comes up quite a bit. Through Harper's Road, it's one of our roads that when we have heavy rain events, most of you will be aware that gets inundated quite quickly, and it can be under seriously about 30 centimetres of flowing water quite a lot. That's to do with the stream up at the back of the Tarihiru there that drains across the back. So there are some drainage issues, but they are across the whole of the Poverty Bay Flats. So Kings and Harpers both flood in a very heavy rain event. They'll both get water over them.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wharehinga and then Councillor Dowsing.
Sorry, also I just wanted to add as well that one thing that was shared with us in regards to King and Harper was sight lines off State Highway 2, and that King suffered from poor sight lines in regards to heavy vehicles. Is that correct, Mr. Gilmore? That was what was shared with us.
That is correct. As I understand it, that was one of the reasons why Harper was preferable.
Councillor Dowsing, you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say that's exactly why my concerns about our aspirations are too low. If we're worried about small areas of drainage and we're worried about alignment of intersections, we need to fix them, not work with what we've got. We need a bigger build.
Any comments any last questions, queries, comments? You wanted to, no, I'm just asking. So I'm going to give you the right of reply. I'm just tidying up questions still, and then Councillor Seymour, you can have the right of reply. Councillor Warsnop and Councillor Hughes. I'll be back. Oh, yes. She can speak, but she can't.
So we've obviously spent the better part of this report discussing really one agenda item. So I'd like to just broaden it out a little bit and say, actually, some stuff in here is pretty momentous, and getting it across the line. I'd particularly like to acknowledge the Eastern Wood Council in their support for what was, I think, proposal number 5, which, and also Federated Farmers. Industry essentially are agreeing to consider options which will put greater cost back on industry for the sake of communities. That's quite a big deal, and they deserve some recognition for that. We haven't specified which mechanisms will be used, but we've got quite a suite that are in this bylaw, which we didn't have before, which I'd like to thank the team for that. On behalf of anybody who uses a road that is shared with heavy traffic, that is really significant. It's something that I'm really rapt to see. In addition to that, obviously we are changing the way that our inner city operates with regards to wheeled recreational vehicles. So I presume our youth will be very excited about that. I am hoping that we have the ability to enforce anybody who decides to be a lunatic in that environment. But broadly speaking, with the exception of the concerns around people, behaving responsibly, I think there's really broad support for what we've done in that space. So just, while I know we've been, very heavily distracted by one aspect of this bylaw, the whole picture is actually pretty significant, and I'd like to thank the team for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Akwaha-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I respect that I'm allowed to speak and I won't be voting due to where I live in my submission. I wanted to thank the staff and the panellists as well for giving us such a great report and discussion and opportunity, but I endorse Councillor Dowsing. Seems to be a day to endorse him from my perspective, but this is a big picture discussion, of course. We know this. We know that our region has significant need when it comes to our roading network for lots of reasons. So I would love to know what can we, be doing as far as our long-term plans, our spatial planning, and all the frameworks that we work within to make our region safe and able to work with industry that we know employ a lot of people, but has huge impacts. And I'm all for understanding the need to consider a space where it's a state highway. However, those ratepayers deserve to be respected for their lifestyle choice as well. So I'm just asking, the significant infrastructure spend in my precinct, which includes an Olympic pool and other builds, we don't know the impacts of traffic flow past those two particular builds in this infrastructure space. I would just like to think we are going to sit down and have a really deep and meaningful and productive conversation about the future of our region, respect to industry with heavy traffic, because as we've just noted and some of you have said already, this isn't not easy. Waka kotahi need to be at the table with some help lines, not a noted they haven't got it in the budget or taking it off a work plan. That's unhelpful to our region, and these issues will continue till my children have children. So I would love to be a part of a solid discussion around infrastructure, necessary network, roading network, etc. And of course, I'm Rail Pro. But anyway, my thoughts are just simply that this is a big picture conversation that, as some of you have said, we need to do a deeper dive on. So again, thank you to all the staff and everybody who's worked in this space for decades. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
So Councillor Gregory touched on this, and I don't think the answer has really been clarified. If the resolution register notes these two routes, is there the ability for us to remove one of those roads, for example, Ormond Road, off the resolution register? What is the process for that? Does that involve going back for public consultation? Is there an appeal process, et cetera, or is it quite simple for us to amend the resolution register in the bylaw without having to start the whole process again?
Madam CEO, can you just talk through all the processes with us?
Yes, I will. I will defer to Joe in terms of the resolution register. It is it's a new approach that we're taking to our bylaws. In theory, it should be easier.
Yes.
So through you, Chair, to clarify, do you mean removed from the resolution register now or at a point later in time?
So if we pass if today's paper was passed and accepted, what is the process for subsequently removing one of those heavy routes off the resolution register?
If we wanted to.
If we wanted to.
So through you, Chair, as outlined in the resolution register report, it would depend on how we assess the significance of the change at the time. So if it's deemed as being of low significance in accordance with our significance and engagement policy, then it doesn't require consultation, or maybe some very limited consultation, and goes to a committee, gets improved, and the resolution register can be changed. If we decide that the significance is higher, then we may start to need more a wider consultation. So that will depend on a number of things, depending on how long it's been since the last consultation was undertaken on the topic, for example.
Be able to give us an indication of how long it would be. We've had comprehensive consultation on this, and this would be I would say a high significant issue if we were to remove one of the two heavy routes. So what sort of timeframes are you envisaging from the legal perspective that we would realistically be able to revisit this without having to go through the whole process again?
Chris.
Thank you, through the chair, through your worship. We did give this particular scenario a little bit of consideration. Myself and some of the legal team were looking at various options. It all depends on the decision that council was seeking to make at a later date. So if the decision was limited to the nature of the routes already consulted upon, and there was no other key matters associated with that, then the flexibility around moving between the two routes discussed so far today through a new resolution out to, I think there is sort of a general acceptance that 6 months, within a 6-month period, consultation stands. After that, things get a bit shakier. Council would be in a position to review the decision. It would be a full council rather than the committee we discussed in the resolution reserve report, but that is the expectation. It will, with the strong caveat, depend on the nature of the decision that you're wanting to make in the future about these routes. If it's limited to just what we've already consulted on, then there's room.
If I might add, through your worship, so if I might add to that, so in terms of the consultation process that was undertaken, my understanding was that 66% of submitters, or 56 or thereabouts, supported the one route. So in that instance, it's about whether the council would use that consultation material going forward, or whether it's the decision of the hearings panel. I think that's something that we would need to confirm with our legal team. I do want to just make a couple of comments and observations that irrespective of, with the recommendations that are put here, the investment in either Harper or King will still stand and is still required to go ahead. We do not have budget for our local roads to accommodate the cost of what we're going to face, and we have yet to see the impact of forestry on Ormond Road. So that's just a flag also. And the other one thing to bear in mind is if we do not have it contemplated in a bylaw or a plan around the heavy vehicle route, then there is potential for waka kotahi to actually say, well, you haven't provisioned anything, you haven't planned for anything, and therefore we may not fund anything. So we would need to smartly address that.
Yeah. Just Councillor Hughes and then right of reply. Thank you, Councillor Seymour.
Oh no, just for me, this feels like a bit of a lose-lose. It was going to be a win-win, a win-lose, and now it's a lose-lose. But I support Shannon Dowsing's comments about being aspirational. And so my questions would be, I think the CE just answered the other one. So we don't have an understanding of the savings on Ormond Road.
We did.
Well, the savings from one route.
Oh, we did. I'd have to pull that up, but WSP did our initial assessment and they did a full wellbeing approach where they looked at Jewel, they looked at Ormond, and then they looked at State Highway 2. And in there, I think they had quantified the impact that that would cost, but it did balance out that if we were to go State Highway 35, naturally, local road share and ratepayer contribution would be less.
Yeah, and that, further to that was in, would that cover the cost of the Awapuni safety implementation? And is that safety kind of required apart from the trucks? Would it be something that would add value even if we weren't considering logging trucks?
Through your worship, so Awapuni Road is used already for logging trucks, so that would be the safety requirements are already inherent or required there for waka kotahi.
Exactly, yeah. so that was it. And then, yeah, it's just supporting Councillor Dowsing around permanent solutions rather than temporary, just understanding that if we're going to have to spend that safety money anyway, then that's kind of in effect a sunk cost and shouldn't really impact our decision making too much. And same with the Ormond Road, depending on how much that's going to save us and being able to utilise State Highway 2 would be useful to understand, I guess.
Councillor Seymour, there has been lots of kōrero and you have the right of reply.
Yeah, there have been some really interesting kōrero, and I just do want to put out there that it is difficult for and interesting for people to have an opinion when they haven't read all of the material. And just to Councillor Robinson, it wasn't that it was determined to be the safety route, because the issues around intersections are not intersections on Awapuni Road, but they are intersections to get the trucks to Awapuni Road. So in actual fact, there are intersections on the Poverty Bay Flats when you come down from the Waimata Valley. So, and that we don't have the money, as the Chief Executive's just covered off a couple of points. We don't have, Council doesn't have the money till it sits down beside NZTA and secure Whakakotahi and secures the funds for those upgrades. This is recommending between 21 and, well, because of what they said to us, it doesn't have 21 to 24 in the resolution. But one would assume, if you take what the bylaw committee had put to you, having listened and read all of the material in front of it, it then gets us into a position in 22, 23, we can get on with Whakakotahi, make it really clear what we're trying to do, see that both the port access, which is one of the lesser ones, and the ones on the Poverty Bay Flats are contained within their budget, that the planning can be done, because planning takes forever, and that we should be by 24 in a position to have just one route. But there's so much work that needs to be done. We don't have the funds set aside, and Whakakotahi have to support us to make even our own work on our own roads happen. It's not like we just go out there and fund our own roads. You should all know that 66 or 67% of any work that's done in this district comes from Whakakotahi. And I welcome the whole lot of you coming to the next RTC meeting, and then we actually are saying to Whakakotahi, this is really important, because there's actually only 3 of us on that committee. The gentlemen and ladies that represent our interest groups do not have a vote, so it would be a really strong message to Whakakotahi if councillors, and occasionally some people do come, thank you very much, were there to say we need to be taken more seriously. It was a revelation to the port company after we fought, 3 of us around the table fought to get that port company access actually on the schedule for this year, and once it went back down to Wellington, they dropped it off. And their excuse was they needed more information. So we did ask, have you had a meet? And I sent an email to both parties as the chair of RTC saying, have you had that conversation to get more information? Because it is too easy. And it'll be exactly like Three Waters if you want to get me going. Here we are, a relative.
Do you going, Councillor?
Do you want to get me going? I didn't
opinion on
think you
this
would.
paper.
I didn't think you would. It's going to be just like Three Waters. We're a small population on the end of the earth as far as Wellington thinks. They don't want to give us money for roading, and they'll jolly well won't be giving it to us for water either. So we need to stand up for what we believe in. But quite honestly, it is not a safety on Awapuni Road issue. That was not the issue. It is the safety of the intersections that need to be designed, the sight lines and all of those things that need to be designed. So there's no reason at all why it can't happen with that new, I've forgotten the name of it, which we've just had explained to us, the register, which resolution register, which is making it quicker and more easy for council to make changes rather than needing to bring the bylaw back for frequent changes. So a heap of work went into this. We did not make the decision lightly. We actually met on a Monday, and we met the following Monday with a little bit more information from council officers to make the decision. And I'd have to say, at the time, the council officers present indicated they could understand why that decision was being made. So there's plenty of room for planning, plenty of room for advocacy to NZTA to get the money to build the route, to make those roundabouts secure. There are 2 schools on the Awapuni route and only 1 actually on the Ormond Road route at the moment. So there is significant safety work to be done. And it's not, when we talk about Awapuni Road or Ormond Road, it needs to be recognised it's talking about the connections to that. And the point made by Councillor Prohibiting, if this bylaw is upheld, but it needs to be upheld, it will take log trucks, or will give authority to take log trucks off all of the small roads within our towns within our town that sometimes see log trucks on them. So it was the best outcome for the moment, allowing time to make the plans to get the next stage done in 2 or 3 years' time, not 20. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair. And thank you to council officers who gave us the material. Thanks, Mr. Gilmore, and your colleague, Ms. Knight, who was present. Thank you.
Okay. So we have had right. So did you move these recommendations, Councillor Seymour? Because there's also audit and risk. All in favour? Contrary? No. Carried. So we will go to page 54. I've had my coffee. I've been to the bathroom. We'll have coffee. 64 of 99. Chris is supposed to be back here there, or is someone else? Kia ora, Chris, do you want to say something before we just opened the paper on the draft resolution register on page 54? Do you want to say a few words, and then we will have our councillors ask some questions?
Yeah, sure. Through your worship, I think the report speaks for itself fairly well. We've been through this on a few occasions as well, but just to be clear, the report seeks a package of resolutions which basically takes the rules in the traffic and parking bylaw that you made earlier and applies them to specific locations in the region. So the resolutions carry over the location data from the schedules in the old bylaw, plus the new resolutions as consulted upon and recommended by the hearings committee. The report also discusses the potential subcommittee to consider minor resolutions under the bylaw. So, for example, no parking lines or adjustment of parking types from P5 to P10s, that sort of thing. Our report seeking a decision in that space can be expected early next year, but that will be following the first report seeking resolutions under the bylaw, so that council can see that whole process working end to end and have a clear idea of what they would be being asked to delegate. So we've got some stuff coming up for some changes to, I think it's Ruru and Joanne Street and a few others. So we'll do all of that first, and then council can see the whole process. So, but that's all from me. Over to you.
Thank you. Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm happy to move this because it's appended to the last our last paper. One thing that I really wanted to, because our last paper was so heavily dominated around heavy vehicle, I won't repeat anything there. But one thing I really wanted to do was really acknowledge those people that fed into the process around these things, particularly Tairāwhiti Adventure Trust and also groups like Ngāti Onioni, the people that are really active users of titirangi maunga. I remember one of the first things when I came in here as a councillor that was discussed was one way over titirangi, and that being a positive thing for people that use it for fitness, people that use that maunga of ours for safety, young mums, etc., etc. And it's really great that that is now included in this space. We're hearing those whānau in regards to that. Equally, again, acknowledging Tairāwhiti Adventure Trust in regards to their feedback to us around the use of wheeled recreational vehicles. The one thing that I did want to note too, just for those around the table and also for any public that might be listening, that if they are on them in the CBD, they can't go any faster than a walking pace. So just it's not like how it's not like you can zoom more down the road or anything like that. However, you're able to still ride your skateboard like down the CBD. People ride them very safely. It's great that we're normalising these other ways of being able to move ourselves around the city. So I'm more than happy to move this or to move this paper, Your Worship. I also did want to thank our chair and also Councillor Foster as well for their mahi in regards to the hearing stuff. It was big work, and I really just want to acknowledge my colleagues in regards to that. Thank you very much to Mr. Gilmore in regards to your mahi, answering the plethora of questions that we had in regards to these things. One thing I did want to note in regards to the resolution register, this is the thing that we're able to adjust, and we have the function to be able to adjust that. Doesn't require us to go back through a whole bylaw process. That was the rationale of including a resolution register, so that we didn't have to go through this 4-yearly kind of process in order to be able to adjust things that really make sense. So yeah, more than happy to move this, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Foster and then Councillor Seymour. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was just going to the second this as well, and just when you look at what the resolution register is all about, it's every single parking, every single stop sign, every single giveaway sign is all in this register, in a resolution register. So it just gives us the ability, or when you look at it, you just see how comprehensive it is for our whole region on every road and all the different requirements, giveaways and stops and everything. So, you know, it is a comprehensive register and it's something that we can adjust accordingly as we go along without having to change the bylaw. So I'm totally in support of it and I'm happy to second it. If I can get ahead of Councillor Seymour.
Councillor Woolsnell.
Thank you. Can I just, it's actually flicking back to the previous paper, but it may just need noting. There is a reference to the prohibited areas in the CBD with regards to recreational vehicles, which possibly doesn't need to be in there if we are not prohibiting anything. That's just on page, where's page 19 of 21 of the report, 53 of 199. Yeah, 22.2. Fair enough. And just on with regards to the committee that's to be formed to review these and that reporting to Sustainable Tairāwhiti, if just the rationale behind Sustainable Tairāwhiti being the committee that reports to, I guess I was wondering what the rationale was. If someone could talk to that, I would appreciate it.
Chris, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Through the chair, through your worship, it's Sustainable Tairāwhiti which holds the appropriate delegations and with regards to bylaws from council. So that could be adjusted through the terms of reference process, but obviously that's where the delegations stand now. So it would be under Sustainable Tairāwhiti.
Thank you.
Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I'm wondering if there is a need or whether there is any consideration from our emerging issue, and that's the electric bikes on the cycleways. I know a lot of them are sort of governed at about 30 kilometres an hour, which is quite fast. But the thing I noticed with them is the ability to do those speeds where you wouldn't expect a bike to be doing those speeds. And the growth in electric bikes is huge at the moment. So I am noticing them a lot more on our cycleways at the moment. And I just wonder whether everyone is starting to feel that there's a bit of a safety consideration to be taken in with those, and whether we do need to start considering what speeds they are doing on those cycleways.
So that would be.
Well, I just wondered if it has come up. I know it has come up before. We've sort of.
Chris, do you have a comment? And not really. No.
I'll have to look into this further. I think is the only answer there. We potentially on the shared paths we could possibly put a speed limit in place. I'll need to do some further research.
So, does the bylaw allow us to do that via resolution?
Yes. Councillor Sheldrake.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Cranston. The increase of cycles and particularly electric bikes, like on the boardwalk down at the front of Midway through back into the cut, and I ride there pretty much every day, is got crazy, the number of bikes coming at you. And so with pram pushing and things, I think it's something in certain areas we really need to look at it.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you. I mean, it's slightly ancillary to the conversation, but I have to say the gentleman from the Living Streets organisation spoke to us at some length about the shared, and they were opposed to shared walking and cycleways, but we weren't asked to do anything about that. And we did actually have quite a conversation. He came in by Zoom over what a reasonable speed was, but it then got down to 30 k's. Well, that is actually quite fast for a cyclist. I mean, at one point you'll see, even in the decision report, it talked about walking speed, but I do think it is an issue. It was raised, we didn't get any further clarity around it, but there certainly was conversation around it. So I take Councillor Cranston's point, and maybe it can be pursued further in future.
Councillor Dowsing, thank you.
Yeah, I think given that bikes are capable of doing 30 k's unassisted, 30 k's isn't actually the problem. A lot of the electric bikes are capable of doing the speed limit. on that, on those walkways. So it's when it's where the point is that they should be on the road, not on the footpath, and whether those, and whether they're, and it may not be a council issue, it may be something that they need to be classified as mopeds instead of as push bikes, because they now meet what the intent of a moped was, which was a assisted vehicle under 50 cc's, able to do 50 kilometers an hour maximum, and you need to register them but not get them warrant fitnesses.
Thank you. Councillor Gregory.
So I ride electric bikes around here and and I haven't, they do go fast and you can go really fast, but you have to be aware of what you're coming up against and what corners, you know, like I get on the grass if there's people coming. I don't think there's been any accidents or anything that we could talk about. And I like to think that we've got some common sense amongst us that we can regulate our speed while we're on traffic areas.
Well, I can assure you, just from the Stoltz household, that several people has been in A&E with bike crash, but Terry would be able to. Councillor Sheldrake, you can shed some light.
Including the previous mayor. He's just got a
Oh yeah, I just saw him on Saturday.
No, just something I meant to say before is with the caravan camp out where it is now, out on the corner of Pacific Street, nearly all those people have electric bikes. They come down, they get on the new boardwalk, and they just come streaming at you, and they seriously go quick. So I don't know, but I agree. I think they could easily stay on the road and come straight down into town. I've heard of electric bikes going up to 70k an hour. So the 30k might be the regulatory thing, but it's quite a simple adjustment, and I know where to go.
So I want to ask a quick question, and please tell me if it's out of line. I wanted to, so this road schedule that we receive here tells us what happens on each road. So I'm just going back to our previous paper where we talked about what happens on each road according to our bylaw. And we will receive extensive feedback on our decision. Is it this paper where we can then say, if we receive extensive feedback, or is this the tool that we will then use to revisit that or get the CEO? You know how we spoke earlier and said after 6 months, I think Councillor Robinson asked about a review, or you can look at maybe after 6 months or 12 months. Would this paper where we're at now be the place where we can maybe add something to that effect? Councillor, oh my God, I cannot remember anyone's names today. CEO, I'll just call you that. Can you please just shed light, because I would love for us to then maybe add that in there, if this is the right tool.
I think through your worship, if you want to capture it, it can be captured here in terms of an action to direct the Chief Executive to look at that particular, revisit that particular issue around heavy vehicles, to take into consideration the previous work that was done, the consultation through all the bylaw, and some of the comments that have arisen from today's discussion. This is the appropriate place to include that resolution.
Any more questions or queries? So, Mr. Wharehinga, you moved this paper. Will you be happy to add in what our CEO has just said? So will you just read what wording I directs this? Oops. Thank you.
Sorry, just one question around the shared pathway on the state highway. This obviously doesn't cover that, but we've got the parking and things on that walkway. How do we address those areas that are common to our urban streets, but not necessarily under our bylaw?
Chris, thank you.
Through your worship, we have a delegation from Waka Kotahi in place to regulate parking on the state highway. That's one of the things that this bylaw does for us. So we can now enforce all parking across within the urban area on State Highway 35, and we will also, that allows us to now address parking on the shared paths and the cycleways along the state highway.
Your worship, just in response to what you were asking about what Ms. Thatcher Swan had suggested, I don't feel that needs to be a recommendation. I'm more than happy though to endorse that it be on our action register and like our council official action register in order to be able to provide some work to bring that back to us.
Yep, thank
you know,
you.
I think that that's really important. If anything that our last discussion has highlighted, that this is the very most important thing to be trying to bed down in regards to this bylaw. So more than happy to for that to say come out of this paper and be connected to this paper in order to go on our action register.
Just to review, yeah. You happy with that?
So just to clarify, just leave it on the action sheet as opposed to as a resolution in the paper?
Yeah, I feel that would still give the impetus though to get the work done, right? Like, doesn't need to have to be. Are you comfortable with that mechanism of council to enable you to do that? As seen.
Through your worship, it depends on how much weight you want to give it. I mean, obviously our action sheets do have a lot of weight. A resolution
different than
carries
a paper.
more so than an action paper, but it's entirely your prerogative as to where do you want to go with this.
I just want us to cover all bases, and that's why I'm proposing adding it here where we talk about the designation of each of these. And this is why I think it gives it the weight.
I'm happy to hear the wording, the proposed wording then. Is that just one?
I don't know.
So directs number 3 would be directs the chief executive to review proposal 11 heavy vehicles for council recommendation or reconsideration in the next 12 months.
Yeah, I'm happy to include that.
Okay, so I'll second that. Any more discussions, questions or queries? Mr. Hughes.
I just want to try and work it out experimentally. So say we've got resolution 2.106 on page 69.
We're on page 55.
Page 69 is part of it, is it?
Oh, yeah, I thought you were at the recommendation.
Oh, no, outside the recommendations. So we
page
have.
are you 69?
Yeah. 2.106. So we have Palmerston Road, Derby Street, 120 minutes.
Mhm.
So someone would come and say, oh, look, we want 180 minutes there. That would then form a report to council where we could then just.
So usually
that
staff have the
resolution.
delegation for smaller stuff
Yeah.
like that, just to action it or decline it.
Okay.
Yeah, all good. Okay, all in favour? Contrary, carried. Thank you. Okay, we are doing well with time, councillors. I'm very proud of our progress. Oh, now I said it. Now it's public bus transport contracts extension, page 94. Are you saying something, councillor Petit? Moved by councillor Purdy. Thank you. Any discussions or queries? Who is that? Councillor Robinson. Hands up, you go. Thank you.
Okay, so we're intending to extend the contract with Go buses through the 2025, and it seems to say that the rationale is to cover off the new regional integrated ticketing system. They use diesel buses, right? We don't have any e-buses in Gisborne, correct? And I'm just really disappointed with this report and the way this has unraveled, that there doesn't seem to have been any real thought given to the climate impact opportunities that arise here. And in fact, even under climate change, the two comments at paragraph 21 and 22 are really just nebulous, and I don't think we've met the standard we should be, that we've said we're going to challenge ourselves to meet. We've sought a review and instructed Abley Consultants. Paragraph 10 says that they're undertaking a strategic review focused on how patronage can be increased and the service made more accessible and appealing to a greater proportion of residents and visitors. No mention about how to reduce our climate footprint or our carbon footprint or our impact on the climate. And I think there's a real lost opportunity. We seem to be extending this contract beyond a period instead of looking around for maybe someone else who can provide more greener public transport. We've locked in for 4 more years, seemingly just so we can meet the Waka Kotahi ticketing system that's coming in this financial year. Looking at this paper and looking at how late this is in this financial year, I can't help but feel that we've missed the mark by 6 months and that we should have had this conversation 6 months ago, knowing this contract was coming up. And then we would have had an opportunity to look around to potentially find a greener provider. So that's my concerns having read this paper.
Thank you. Did you second the paper?
No, we did not.
You did not. Mr. Wilson, thank you.
Through the chair, the delays in this have been around the RITS rollout across the country. So we've been waiting for certainty about the RITS contract coming out. So that's partly why we've had to wait till now to go forward with GoBus. This is around the extension of the contract with all of the different uncertainties that we have from the strategic review, from the RITS rollout. This was the easiest way for us to navigate all of those other changes by having GoBus in place. The strategic review of where the buses are going, where we're servicing and those things will cover off some of the concerns that you've raised there around climate change. There is an opportunity for us through the contract to review the fleet. I'll have to get, the fleet can be reviewed. However, I'd have to be with, I'd need Donna to be able to tell the exact timeframe for when that is in a contract. But this is the easiest way for us to move with all of the changes that we have in front of us at the moment.
Yeah, it may be the easiest way, but it just feels that if we'd done this a little smarter, we might have been able to address a really important issue. The ability to provide green public transport is, when I read this paper, an opportunity lost. Had we locked in GoBus for 2 years, maybe, then we've got an opportunity to meet the RITS and then work towards finding a greener solution for Tairāwhiti.
Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I'll second the paper, by the way. But whilst I agree with Councillor Robinson's sentiment, I think it's a whilst I agree with Councillor Robinson's sentiment, I think it's a policy adjustment in our procurement policy and falls in line with whether we put in place a determination to seek to procure contracts from suppliers who have carbon emissions reduction goals and who are actively seeking those reductions. And it would, and by putting it into our procurement policy, it therefore rolls out across the organisation instead of an individual debate. It also, talks to whether we should be doing that around other things, like are they living wage employers? Are they do they have ethical procurement policies themselves? That kind of thing. But for today, I agree with the sentiment. I just think that it's best done in our procurement policy.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dowsing. Anyone else want to comment? If not, I've got a mover and Councillor Badette, seconder and Councillor Dowsing. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Okay, we move to our town beach cleanup request for OPEX. You are just a mover extraordinaire today. Well, we've got no choice because it's our biggest asset and we want our community to enjoy this summer, but it's still of great concern going forward that we can clean up the beach tomorrow and the next day there could be a storm and we're right here where we are. So yes, we need to do it, but it's part of that risk paper which we discussed earlier, which have the shorter and the longer term issues there. Councillor Dowsing, you go first, and then Councillor Cranston.
Thank you. Yes, and I think it's the point I want to raise is that whilst it may be in another agenda, it isn't in this one, and that the issue should have either come through this committee or through Sustainable Tairāwhiti in its fullness, so that our community had the opportunity to see it at the elevated platform that these committees are. And personally, I believe that there needs to be an alternative funding source found for this, perhaps through forestry consents, if that is an identified source of that increase in timber waste, which I assume it would be fair to attribute it to forestry activity in this region. It's certainly not, some of it, yes, but it's certainly not a natural debris load that's coming out of those waterways. So we have a mechanism that's driving the increase. We also have a mechanism that could be used for funding that increased cleanup.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Cranston, and then Councillor Warsnop, then Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely support getting it cleaned up. It's pretty obvious. It's our summer asset. This is not the first time it's happened within such a close proximity to Labour weekend. And I thought we had scheduled it out. I know the rain will come when the rain will come, but I think we should look at rescheduling it out 3 weeks later than Labour weekend. I know it'd be nice to have it nice and clean for Labour weekend, but it's not as essential of getting it nice and clean for the summer. And that 3 weeks could be the period, because I know in the past we have had this before within 10 days of Labour week. We've had the same issue. So yeah, perhaps we could look at a rescheduling of that first cleanup.
Councillor, did someone wanted to comment?
I can comment to that. I mean, I think we can look at through worship the scheduling of this, but it really does come down to the weather and what the weather's going to do. So we may schedule it 3 weeks after, and then we might have an adverse weather event. So it is, you know, yeah, exactly. So
unfortunately, there's also the expectation of the Food and Wine Festival and other events that mark the start of summer at Labour weekend. So historically, we've always had it clean before Labour weekend. But I hear what you're saying. Councillor Warsnop, Seymour, Foster.
So I just wanted to note, and it's not probably very prominent in this report, but the one that went to the Audit and Risk Committee talked much more about the strategy that is to be implemented really in order to ideally get ahead of some of the drivers of this, because while forestry does have a big impact in some instances, it tends to depend on where the rain falls and which catchment and in what volumes. And increasingly, as farms fence off waterways, the fact that we already have a reasonably high incidence of willows amongst all the waterways in Tairāwhiti means that they're going to explode because stock aren't controlling them. So that strategy is going to be really critical, because other than pine, willow is probably the next largest contributor to what ends up on the beaches. So I think the strategy is, while this is reactive, the strategy is hopefully going to be proactive, and I welcome that. Thank you.
Councillor Seymour and then Foster. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the paper, which we do understand the issues. I'd just like to particularly talk about Uawa, where the league field at the moment has got a huge amount of chip on it. And I did ask whether the public would be able to have access to it. And I understand that one of the planting programs, Uawanui's planting program, is going to use a lot of it, but there is so much there. It is going to take truckloads, yes, truckloads and truckloads. So I don't think we want it rotting down on the league field. So I'd just like to ask if the Chief Executive can give removal for the community to access it if they wish, as well as Uawanui, because there is just acres of it, almost acres of it. There's piles and piles that have been chipped. And I mean, that is another cost. And I know the 34,000 there mentioned mulching, which we haven't actually done in the past. So that is increasing the cost of removal. But it is really useful if the local people can access some of that for their gardens, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. Access to that wood chip is being coordinated with the community, including Uawanui. So there would be the opportunity for others to access that wood chip as well. Take a look at it.
Councillor Foster and then Councillor Sheldrake. Thank you.
We've got to start respecting our town beaches, and I don't just mean over summer, I mean 12 months of the year. We need to have a program that works in for the environment of Waikanai and Midway Beach. 12 months of the year. Winter time, there's still people frequenting the beaches at winter time. There's plenty of surfers with our two big main surfing areas. When you've got to go surfing in the middle of winter and clamber over all the wood to get to the beach, and then there's the wood in the water as well, waiting to come back to shore, it's dangerous. So, you know, it wouldn't be such a hard thing to look at this as over a 12-month period. And if when it gets to a certain build-up, it's just moved down to Beacon Street and piled there for later on to be moved once or twice a year in a bigger program. But I think we need to look at this because these are huge assets. Why can't I, Midway Beach, or our main beach, city beaches, we've got all the residents here as well, motor camp, and who wants to look at a whole pile of wood all year waiting for a particular time for it to go? We need to have a managed program that looks at right through the year and moves it accordingly as it builds up. So that's my 2 cents worth. Protect our beaches and respect them. And yeah, we don't need beach wood all over them. Kaiti Beach can have them. We can take it down there. We like it down there.
Thank you for that impassioned plea, Councillor Foster. Councillor Shelgrave.
Thank you. I'm really pleased it's getting cleaned up. It is our big summer, you know, selling point, and particularly it's COVID, you know, people can go to the beach and enjoy it. I just want to know, do we have a contractor that will do it before Christmas this year, please?
Through your worship, yes, we do have a contractor lined up if this goes ahead.
Great.
So then I had Councillor Robinson, then Councillor Faulkner.
What understanding do we have, if any, of the impact of leaving wood on the beach above a certain level? What impact does it have on assisting the sand to reclaim, the beach to strengthen, the dunes to build? It's one thing to say, let's sweep everything off the beach, but actually there is a natural progression here, and we need to understand that so that we can make actually environmentally sound and proactive decisions. And also from a cost saving perspective, do we decide just to maybe sweep half of the beach at a certain level, and we accept there will be driftwood above a certain level? But that's one way of saving money instead of taking every single twig off the beach. But I really want us to understand moving forward actually what the role plays in these very vulnerable areas, because yeah.
That, Mr. CEO.
Yeah, so your worship, that's the process that we will embark on next year in terms of the research that needs to be done, the options that are available for us for medium to long-term management of woody debris, which could include part of it replenishing the dunes, but and then also looking at the realistic volume that's there, whether or not that you need that much. So it's all part of a 12-month program that will result in a policy position from council, but also looking at a suite of funding tools that we can use to be able to do the reactive stuff, which is what we're currently just doing, is managing the reactive part. But also with the other part about it is our regulatory hat and how we manage 3A overlay land and working with landowners as well. So it's a big piece of work.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Your Worship. You're quite right, Madam CEO. This is the tail end of the tiger. At the end of the day, there is a much greater conversation to be had around land use capability in this region. My question actually, interesting, relates right back to Councillor Seymour's comments around the fact that if we're going to mulch at a regular time across the year, this amount of timber, is there the potential also for city residents to have access to that mulch as well? I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, it lands on our beaches. I know that there's a really great benefit here, if not seen as waste, but actually as a resource.
Diane.
Through you, Madam Chair. So going forward, we will have a resource consent that will allow us to do the mulching on reserve land near the town beach, which will do two things. It will reduce the amount of transport costs, obviously, but also will mean that we have some control over the mulch and the byproduct and access for the community to that mulch going forward.
What was the time frame? We can't hear.
Sorry, it's just after a time frame.
Through you, Madam Chair, we plan to lodge reasons consent early next year. Our current one expires in December.
So even though we're talking here about town beach cleanup and it does include Uawa, we should, when we do our strategic review, also remember beaches like Tikapa. You know, Bill, when we go up the coast and we in Ruatoria, lots of times, lots of concern raised even in those northern beaches. So I know this is for the city, but we do need to make sure we include those beaches as well. Okay, I do have a mover and a seconder. Our super mover, Councillor Burdett, our super seconder, Councillor Faulkner, all in favour, contrary, carried. We move to 106 is just our schedule of meetings, which they usually set out 3 years or for the whole 3 years, and then we chop and change a little bit. Heather, there's a few things, or James, that's changed with justification there, which makes sense. Like our GHL meeting, which would be not before audit and risk, but before finance, so that all councillors anyway would attend. So thank you for that streamlining. I will move this. Any questions or queries? Seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. You had a question, Councillor Worsnop.
Yes, I was just hoping that a slightly amended version of this could be available to prospective candidates for the upcoming next year's elections, because I think for those of us who are new in this cycle, that would have been invaluable, in particular if scheduled was the induction program.
Yep. Great comment. So we need to make sure people are aware that if they are elected, the next week there's a good week or a week and a half worth of induction happening. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I can arrange, sorry, through the chair, I can arrange for that to be included in nomination packs, for example.
Thank you. Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to know why the RTC isn't meeting till March, because it is really important, and it normally meets on the back of wastewater management in the afternoon, and it does in March. But I mean, we had the last meeting in the beginning of, actually at the end of November, and we've all talked about how important roading is, and I see we don't have a meeting there until the beginning of March.
Can someone please get back to Councillor Seymour in that regard?
Through the chair, the Wastewater Management Committee meeting in February is an additional one. So at the last meeting, the WMC asked for more meetings in regards to where the wastewater treatment plant build was and the number of water topics that are being worked through. So the RTC is on its usual 12-week rotation. It's just there's an additional Wastewater Management Committee meeting being added.
It still seems a large gap.
Are those the times that they usually happen, the 4 times a year?
Yes,
okay. Any more questions or queries? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All in favour, contrary, carried. Heather, can I ask, now that it's been passed, that you send all those diary invites to us all? Thank you, because the year is already filling up. We move to Nadine, our CEO's report. Nadine, thank you for an extensive report. It was good reading. Do you want to have a quick chat in the beginning, or are you just open for questions?
Just an acknowledgement about the team that works across the organisation to pull together the activity report, so it gets fed in from all sections across, and so yeah, just want to acknowledge them because it's not an easy task pulling it together. You'll see this just sums up there's a lot going on in the policy space. We will be seeing a lot more in 2022 for us to engage on or be advised of. We do have an attachment there which is around the Department of Internal Affairs pilot program that they ran with us. I'm sure you might have some questions on that, but yeah, apart from that,
good. Okay, so people might have a few questions. It was quite clear. Councillor Bill. You just need to use your microphone.
And then I've got a few questions on page 8. Water Services Act to the CEO. The annual registration with regulator Tūmata Arawai for suppliers. And in a brief statement just above that, that says if households get the water out of a bore or I presume a spring, they have to be registered with this crowd on an annual basis.
Yep.
And then they got to meet all those conditions below.
Correct, if you're supplying the water to households, yes.
So that's personal stuff too.
If you're an individual collecting water, it'll be difficult to be captured under the Act, but the intention is that the private suppliers will be regulated.
Inclusive of Marae.
Yep.
Thank you. And then the trust that's doing all that planting on the river. Just put my eyes back on. Whakaora Ratia has completed pole planting. Who are they?
Through your worship, that is the group that is led by Hilton Collier.
So there's
So
there's
the ones that we visited.
Te Wiwi Ngāti, Te Rui Wapu. Is it a combination?
Sorry, yes, there, so the whakaora here is, and we're complementary groups working together in the Waiapu catchment, sorry.
They do a good job. I'm not being critical, just. And then page 28, right, third from the bottom, wastewater treatment upgrade options for water amalgamation rule 10 water supply. 3 waters reform economic stimulus. It's a huge amount of money. Is it council that holds the money or does it go out to communities?
Yes, council holds the money. So if you recall, this was part of the package that they gave us when we entered into the MOU with Department of Internal Affairs and central government. And so that was split into looking at supply to Muriwai, topping up the wastewater treatment plant, and also the works to be done in Victoria.
And supplementary to that, Madam Chair, while I've got the CEO's attention, in terms of, there was supposed to have been a report here on water supply in Ruatoria and all the exploratory work that was done. William Tamati was supposed to supply it or provide it. Are you better informed than me?
Through your worship, we can have a paper that provides the progress that we've made there. Mr. Wilson can make that available in the new year at the operations committee.
Yeah, because there's plenty of inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Warsnop and then Councillor Foster. I was going to break it up into sections. Yeah, so I'm going to break it up into sections because it's just like Nadine said, it's easier. So any questions in regards to the central government update, which was page 3 to 6. Councillor Warsnop and then Councillor Seymour.
I presume that's Taumata Arawai fits under that.
Yep.
So just to Bill's point, there's actually a paragraph that highlights pretty well just the extent of the implications for this region. That's the last paragraph on page 120 of the of 199. And what that says basically is if you are supplying your house and someone else's house, you fall under the auspices of Taumata Arawai. If you choose to not then supply the other entity because you don't want to be a supplier, Taumata Arawai will then become the supplier of that other house and they will give you the bill. That is massive for the coast. That is massive for everywhere inland, every little township, every sheep station, because hardly any of them have only one house. Every orchard, even townships where one house supplies the tank water for 2 buildings on a title. So the implications of this cost-wise, we had Councillor Faulkner and I were lucky enough to sit down with some representatives of DIA, Taumata Arawai. maybe 2 months ago, and they estimate that per household, the cost will be $2,000 at a minimum. So that's an estimate. Obviously, they're probably yet to finalise that, but that includes installing some kind of fancy device. It doesn't include things like actually securing a different source. So yeah, don't underestimate the significance of this. It's a big thing that our community need more information on with some urgency, I feel.
It feels to me, taumata Arawai, even just that meeting we had that day, they don't realize how big, especially in a community like ours, where so many people rely on that, what a massive impact that is going to have on everyday lives. Councillor Seymour, we're still with central government updates, and then Councillor Faulkner.
I have exactly the same issue as Councillor Worsnop's raised, and I don't think this council is doing enough about it. We need to get our local member of parliament into the room, and we actually need to talk to them about what it really means, because there were submissions to the select committee that tried to make the number greater, and we've acknowledged that there will be a need to have regulated water supplies, maybe for 5 or 10 suppliers, but it is absolutely ludicrous what they're suggesting, and unless we start making a noise about it now, we are just being compliant. And so they do need to understand it is going to be so impactful on so many people. It is completely outrageous is what I've written beside it. And I do know there were submissions against it, but clearly they weren't listened to. I urge us to invite the MP here in the new year and for us to sit down. And I know it says we don't know how many individual supplies there are in the region, but there'd be hundreds and hundreds, thousands. And it will impact on so many people. And it is just completely ludicrous, comes out of Wellington without a real understanding of what the implications of it are. The other one that I would like to know is item 3. It is under local government and policy, and that taumata Arawai is under the local government and policy. I'd like to know how much we've spent on the appeal so far, the whanau kai appeal, and you've touched on the lawyers, etc. And then I just would like to know how much the council has spent on that to date, please. And I did also wonder whether the Chief Executive could give us a very brief update on the issues around our water that's been bailed. We know it's been put off till next year because they've found the submissions are in opposition and they haven't got the time to do what they need to do. And maybe we could raise that with Kiri as well and have a serious conversation over the water services bill and the 3 waters issues early in the new year, because we haven't actually invited her to council quite some time, have we? I know you talked to her from time to time.
So we've cancelled quite a few of our meetings in the last time.
Yeah, so could we try and have
Absolutely. I will put that on my to-do list, and in the new year, try and organise in that first bit to have a good catch-up, talk about all these issues. Yes, in March, or early March, late February. Nadine Thatcher-Swan, comments on how much we've spent on.
Yeah, through your worship, I don't have that information in front of me at the moment, so I'll have to circulate that once I've spoken with the team. But yeah, just the other part in terms of taumata Arawai, so that bill is now an act, so it is effectively in effect. And they are going through the process of re-registering council and their water supplies. When the Chief Executive, Bill Bayfield, was here and visited, and that's when he would have spoken to councillors that had that time with him, he also undertook comprehensive engagement with iwi, including Marae, in terms of them supplying some of their water and the support that can be provided to them. I think the issue that we needed clarification on, if people were supplying water and they said we do not want to supply water, what it means for council as a supplier of last resort, because then ultimately it would or potentially fall back onto us or the new water services. So I think water entities, so I think that's the area that we need to be clear on, but recognising it is now an act and they now have the powers to enforce things.
But thank you, supplementary to that, because in actual fact, it's completely impractical for council to be the fallback in some circumstances, just as if we only touch on pastoral farming and horticulture and marae. There's not going to be an ability for council to be the fallback supplier in our rural areas where most of us rely on tank water anyway and make provision for our other households on our properties to have good, safe tank water. But it's, I just don't think they get it. And can I just ask how some people had the opportunity to present to the committee when they were here, or to someone, and not everybody did?
So Mr. Balefield met with the CEO and the mayor, and those two ladies organised their own.
Three of us, actually.
Oh,
Deputy Mayor.
it wasn't part of us organising it.
He
We just
requested
depended on
time
us.
with us and us speaking.
No, okay. I had no idea. I just, Nadine and myself met with him, and I just saw you going in after us. Okay, we are going to Meredith. You ask your question, and then we're also covering. I lied about good time management. I just see we're not that good. So Meredith, we include number 3 as well. The local government stuff as well.
Thank you so much. I'm back. Listen, I just wanted to ask our CE, with all that is happening within the central government space, and I want to support Councillor Worsnop and Seymour respect to meeting with our local MP. I just feel like there is so much being imposed upon local councils through legislation changes and a whole host of reform, which we know changes is good for us, but it's just coming thick and fast. And I just wanted to know, you know, with regard to our Rohe, our region, and with all these changes, how are we feeling, Madam C? But also, I just feel that, as Councillor Seymour's noted, the impacts and the implications of a lot of these changes, they don't feel like they've been thoroughly considered, and we're getting lots of people coming at us as councillors asking, what are we doing, is albeit to push back, but certainly to say, we don't want to just be compliant, because we've got to unpack, we've got to dive deep into what these will mean for us as a region. So I'm just wondering, my question to you, Madam C, is just, do we have space to meet with the local MP, but also how is this impacting on the expectations of staff for our unitary authority? Because we're hearing it's concerning, the amount of pushing to us to implement things that have huge consequences to our region. So that was my question. Kia ora.
Kia ora, through your worship. Kia ora, councillor. So I think it's fair to say the sector is feeling the pinch of the reforms in the reform program. I don't think you'll get a sympathetic ear, however, in terms of how local authorities are feeling towards that. We as a unitary are particularly hit hard because we're getting both the TLA and the regional council reform changes, but we're also in a privileged position that we can see the impact of the sum, and in terms of how that's either going to break the system or where the disconnect points are. So I think that it's quite a good opportunity for us to leverage our point of difference, being a unitary authority and a smaller one, in terms of the changes that are coming down the pipeline. But we're just dealing with them as we can, all in stride.
Yes. Okay. Any questions in regards to number 2 or 3? Councillor Faulkner. We're covering central government and local government and policy updates.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a couple of questions. The first one, page 117, the waste legislation and strategy under development. We have often spoken in these chambers about being aspirational in this space. I know there are much smarter minds than mine working on exciting alternatives for our various waste streams as a community. Does this developing strategy give us opportunity to support those people? This is my first question.
Mr. Wilson.
Through your worship, the new waste legislation that's coming in is predominantly focused on the product stewardship schemes, which are further up the pipeline from ourselves. As the end recipients for a number of those wastes, we're very keen to see tyres, car batteries and those things to have a scheme in place, because it takes the burden away from ratepayers who have to deal with those. We'll be waiting to see what the legislation looks like before we provide back what a submission is going to be and how we can support that better.
Yep. Just keep going, people.
Yep. Following on from that, the next one is actually just an explanation around a title here. Page 122, the TIRA for the Economic Action Plan, Joint Regional Just Transition Planning. Just always strikes me as a word that's a bit like nice or kind. What does just mean in this title?
It's a really good question, councillor, and I had asked the same thing. So it is a new kind of term for equitable, just as in that.
Yep. Okay, we're moving on to civil defence updates. Any queries or questions in regards to civil defence? We have got our COVID resurgence stuff, which if anything change, I will share that information with you, and we are well prepared. Any questions or queries? Councillor that one, Faulkner, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At least I can remember who you are.
Yes.
I think for me, I just wanted, this was a comment more than a question. It was a huge shout out and a bouquet to our civil defence team. In fact, the entire council, including her worship and our local MP, for the support that our community across the flats, including the city, received from this team when it came to the weather event 3rd to the 5th of November. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to relationships. Any questions? Thank you for the updates, Nadine. General management, number 6. 17 to 18 of the report. So I don't know the numbers.
129.
Thank you, Terry. At the front bit. Okay, we move. Oh, sorry, Councillor Seymour, Councillor Cranston, and then Councillor Warsnop. Thank you.
Just at the bottom of the, under the health and safety, just.
What page are you?
129. Can I just ask the Chief Executive of that tool that's been employed, is that going to be able to be used in vehicles? Well, you're talking about for staff, lone and remote working staff are being reviewed, and in conjunction, upgrades are being delivered for with an upgraded Garmin. And without being too explicit, clearly I'm talking about the incident reported in the newspaper the other day, and I'm just wondering if the tool, the updated Garmin, is going to be available for them to use within their vehicle. Is my question.
It's a watch.
I know. Is it? I mean, it's a yes or no.
Through your worship, we have e-roads for people that are in the vehicles. The Garmin's when you're out of the vehicle and moving around. So in the vehicle, we have e-roads outside of it, which does more than just where they are GPS. In the vehicle, we can. Outside the vehicle, you can't take it with you. That's why we have the Garmin's.
Okay.
Councillor Cranston had his hand up.
Councillor Cranston and then Councillor Warsnop. Thank you.
Yeah, page 132, 9 financing costs. I know it's a year-to-date budget, so it should be reasonably current. It states that the lower financing costs are due to lower interest rates. The interest rates bottomed out quite some time ago, and they're actually on the way up now. So I'm just wondering implications of those movements.
It should also, sorry, for your worship, say that it's also the program of the capital expenditure, and some of that's a little bit down with regards to the wastewater treatment plant. So therefore, there's lower interest rate because of the timing, lowest little bit of the cost that we still have because we have the our buying impacts over a period of time, but it also is because the actual amount of loans that we've drawn down is less. The impacts of what does that mean in terms of our forecasting with interest rates going up, it tends to, with where we have with our treasurer, to be within what we had planned for, the long-term plan. It still hasn't changed significantly from that because we have a mix of when loans are due and the cash of the swaps over that time. So that hasn't at the moment indicated that the interest rates are going up, and we are within those bounds, but obviously we will review it as we go on.
Councillor Warsnop and then Councillor Dowsing. Thank you.
Thank you. So just on page 134, where we mentioned playgrounds, I've just...
Next section.
Let's move to the next section.
Sorry. Can I keep going? Go. Yep. So where it refers to playgrounds, I'm just wondering, mindful of the deputation that was made from Elgin, the Elgin community, and with regards to there being a gap where they are for their children in terms of facilities. If we had made any progress identifying some options in response to that. And then I've just got another point.
Through you, Chair. Lindsay Weaver is part of our Parks and Open Spaces team and is our play champion, has been meeting with Sport Gisborne Tairāwhiti in Elgin, Etu Elgin, to identify some play options there.
Just sticking with playgrounds, I want to put a shout out to the Māori responsiveness team and the people who are doing townships for being very agile under some trying circumstances recently. And just to say how much it is appreciated, I've had really amazing feedback about those ladies, so really appreciate it. And also if we could possibly at some point have a look at how we are allocating the funding for those upgrades, just to make sure that with our new bigger budget that we are catering that to have the best impact in the most useful way.
Thank you. Councillor Dowsing, and then Councillor Seymour, and then Councillor Foster, and then Councillor Cranston.
Thank you. Seeing we've jumped into the next section, I'm going to just raise public conveniences, and I see that my favourite Hill Street toilet is back in the list. Coming with new budgets, so I'm going to assume that they've gone up. Yeah, I'm just going to again highlight my opposition to the attorney reinstatement project there, because it's just absolute waste of money in comparison to the great things we could be doing with that money. The point I was going to raise, and maybe focus projects is the right place for it, is that when I look around this room, and I didn't know where to fit this in the agenda because we don't have a governance section in the CE plan, CE piece, was that there's 20 odd people in this room working on devices and 4 people with paper documents. Can we please transition to a device first format for our agendas?
What's the word you just used?
Point of order, Madam Chair, personal preference.
It's not personal preference. We have policy around being paperless. We have there is no section in the CE report for governance at this stage. So I'm asking that it be put on the action sheet.
Yes, because we've had discussions about people struggling. So I just want to put it out there. You cannot chair a meeting properly from a device. So to me, I will not be chairing. I cannot make notes and chair a meeting from a device. So I will always require a printed copy. I know we do give people some options as well. So I hear what you're saying.
But what I'm saying is that for the efficiency of everybody who uses a device to read their agenda, we are wasting hundreds of hours a year. So if we move to a logical format that fits our screen instead of a portrait format, we will be saving time for every other person in this room apart from those who have a paper copy.
Yes, and we've had the feedback about it needing to be a sharper difference. It needs to be easy to use. I thought you used the word. Did you say starburst?
Device first. Yeah.
Okay, I thought starburst. Thank you for that. Any other questions or queries? Councillor Seymour.
Thank you. Back to the playgrounds. Could I just ask if the equipment that needed to be moved from Tukumara Bay, it's through you to Yarn, is going to be operational before Christmas, please? Because it's going to be put in the playground park or the
Ms.
park.
Sutherland. I see you, Meredith.
Through you, the Chair. We're working very closely with the Board of Trustees at Hatiarangi School. We have an agreement which is about to be signed. We, in discussion with the contract manager, looked at starting the build this side of Christmas with the hope that we would be done by the Christmas holidays. Our concern was that we'd have a half-built structure and that wouldn't be safe for the community. So what we'll be doing is starting that installation very early in January, and it will be complete within a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cranston.
I'll jump in there because my question was about that. It says here it's a short-term solution. Is there any prospect of it being a permanent solution? It seems that it would be a better spend to get in there and do it right than have the short-term solution and then have to move it
Through you, the chair, we are looking at some longer term options, and staff will bring a paper to council in the new year. Through you, the chair, the intent with reinstalling some of the play equipment that was at the skate park is about being able to activate a space quickly. The school is being very generous in enabling the community to use that space outside of school hours, but it doesn't feel like that's a long-term solution. So we will be bringing further options for consideration.
Any other questions, Councillor Foster and then Councillor Robinson?
Yeah, thank you. This is to do with the 1,000-year bridge, and there's nothing on here updating us on the progress. And I note there's been some activity on the hillside opposite Prohibiting with big cranes and building, and also the closure of the walkway going up there. So I'm concerned that that closure, because there's been no activity happening there at all since the crane activity a couple of weeks ago, and yet the foot of the walkway is still closed, got a closed stop sign on it. So can I just an update, please, of where we're at with the 1,000-year bridge project and how long we will expect that walkway to be closed, please?
Through your worship, contractor was up there undertaking some test piles and checking for ground conditions. We also had to undertake some archaeological work as well, just to see what was there. So we have works restarting back there on site in February, and I'll check to see why the fences haven't come down yet. I'm suspecting because there's still a large hole there that will be closed in before they finish for the year.
So the walkway might be open.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Sorry if I missed the answer for this question. What was the timeframes for the engagement process with the Algon community regarding the playground?
Sutherland.
Through the chair, the engagement has been happening since I think that deputation came to council. I can't tell you exactly what the outcomes are. It's led by the community, but we're participating and supporting them to land on some play options. I think one of which is that the school has had a new playground recently installed. And there's also been discussions about activating streets and creating play spaces and informal spaces.
Do we expect to have this back in some form, say February or March?
Through you, the chair, I could bring an update to a future committee.
Thank you. Councillor Akwata Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My query is just respect to reading about the Olympic pool development, the Kiwa pools. I see the soil contamination in respect to asbestos has been managed through resource consent. I just wondered if we've got anywhere with regard to the asbestos at the site for that sculpture that we get asked about from time to time. So that was my query, was just noting we've got contamination obviously throughout region, and it's being dealt with at the Kiwa pools site, but how's the other site?
Thank you, Madam CEO.
Thanks for that, Councillor Akuhata Brown. We had met, and this stuff it's not on the agenda, but so off the top of my head, we had met last week to talk about that with iwi representatives. We have provided them with the cost to remediate. They now are going to consider the costs of that. We had tried to get a clear timeframe within which to come back to us so that we can proceed or look at alternative options.
Thank you for that. Okay, we move into our last two sections, 8 and 9, which is grant funding and regional roading activity. Thank you for those updates. Do I see any hands up? If not, do I have a seconder for this? Because Councillor Burdett, Councillor Sheldrake. Thank you for an extensive report, Nadine. One last question, Mr. Wilson, from me is the roundabout outside here. I want just to ask of you, I know I've seen I was going to forget about it, and then I just saw on the CEO, the last picture. Can you please give us a rough update on timeframes? I see a draft design here on what will happen because it's been in that temporary state for quite some time. And I think we're ready to move to something more permanent.
Through your worship, we've got the last draft designs back that you've got in front of you now. We've now got it sitting, going out for procurement. We're trying to bundle the works. If we do it separately, then it won't be effective for us. So we're trying to bundle this with the Stout Street upgrade to go out at the same time because they're the same type of works that'll be done together early in the new year.
Thank you for that.
Native tree right by the side of the bridge that the car almost plowed into, will that be able to be saved in the, because it's a terrible block for the sightline coming from Usmouse Street towards the roundabout.
So your worship, we not picking up anything outside the roading corridor in the proposal at this current stage. We won't be going outside the roading corridor, so we won't be touching the tree.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner, last question, and then Councillor Cranston, then I'm going to put this paper.
My apologies for being out of the room when we covered this section. So it was just a quick question, and it's probably a yes or no answer around the planting of the second rotation land area in the Wainaki. Do we have the capacity, indeed the willingness, to plant in our own right and therefore use the emissions trading scheme and indeed carbon credits to the benefit of our ratepayers in this region, because it is a very lucrative way of making money right now. And if we want to offset rates in the future, you're looking at 7 years and suddenly you've got a check coming in. So yeah, can we get some thought on that, please?
Who is going to answer? Amy.
Through the chair, unfortunately with that land, most of it is classed as pre-1990 forest land, therefore we only receive a one-off allocation of ETS credits for that land, and there's no advantage to us in planting that ourselves in order to earn credits in the future.
So those credits have already been paid?
We already have those credits, yes. We have a one-off allocation of around 65 credits per hectare that we already have.
Just supplementary, do we have a contractor prepared to work with us on that yet, on that area, please?
Through the chair, we are going out with an EOI to try and identify some parties to work with us on that land area. We expect that EOI to close in early February, in which case we'll bring a report back to council in February.
Thank you.
Councillor Cranston, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to reiterate what I said at Regional Transport about the map on page 146. We've had issues in the past with proximity of crossings to roundabouts and crossings, and it was based on what we found when we were doing work at Balance Street, with people coming down Balance Street, turning into Ormond Road left and then going straight onto a pedestrian crossing. And my concern with this map was two of the crossings there have the same implications and risk, where two of the roads, it's quite removed from the roundabout, but two of them, if you are turning left, you're coming straight onto pedestrians as soon as you get onto that crossing. And Dave Hadfield said it was just draft and they would be looking at that. So.
Thank you for that. I also wanted to ask on behalf of our not so mobile community, which are older people, but also moms with prams and young kids on bikes, will there at those pedestrian crossings be pier crossings so that there's or do you have to cross the whole road at once, Mr. Wilson, or will there be a little haven that you can wait?
Through your worship, in the draft designs, there's those refuge centres in the middle of the road.
I couldn't hear what you just said.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. That's good. Okay, all in favour? On tree carried. Okay, we move to page 183, councillors. We are slowly catching up, but we are a little bit behind. Diane, thank you. We are here, and Dufford is here with us as well. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Can you just clarify that for me? David, thank you and welcome for thank you for joining us here today. And Diane, do you want to have a quick kōrero and then we'll have several questions? Thank you. You go.
Through you, the chair. So this report is really responding to the report that went to the Operations Committee in May this year. And a recommendation of that report was to prepare a Reserves Act management plan for Makarori. We've engaged, so Strategy and Livable Communities have worked together to engage Exist consultants to lead this strategy piece for us. And advice from them consistent with the thoughts around leading into the TRMP review is that a Makarori master plan would better enable us to consider not just council reserve land, but other land alongside to provide more of a wider landscape consideration and input.
Councillor Seymour.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the report. And it is the community of Makarori are absolutely passionate about this. I'm happy to move the report, but I just got one query through you, Mr. Chair, to Diane. Does that mean that the bollards will be a part of the management plan and the bollarding in conjunction with NZTA is not going to go ahead, or is it separate?
Through you, the chair, the Bollards project is separate. So that report that went to the Operations Committee in May last year envisaged that that bollards were the best mechanism to provide safe access and limit vehicle use along the dune environment there. So that work can proceed. We have lodged resource consent. We have had discussions and received approval from Waka Kotahi, and are discussing with private landowners that adjoin the GDC reserve area as well. So that work can proceed in the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Diane,
very
do we have
much.
any other questions? We have a mover and Councillor Seymour. Do we have a seconder? Seconder and Councillor Foster. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
Okay, our next paper is page 190. So this is straightforward. This is to comply. We've discussed this before. Any questions or queries about the minimum requirements? Councillor Seymour. Councillor Seymour moves, seconded Councillor Worsnop. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Meredith Te Maruata Whanuid. Thank you for your report. Do you want to give a quick kōrero, and then if there are questions, we'll put it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Listen, just really thank you so much to staff that had supported me to attend the hui in Blenheim, and of course our Mayor giving me the space to stay on. But it's an absolutely exciting part of my life. I love the role I have in this space. Have met with a number of the reforming committees throughout with regard to government reforms, and have been able to add value, speak from a Māori perspective. Te Maruata have been increasingly asked to speak to quite a variety now of different policy and legislative changes. So I've been able to attend and sit through a number of meetings with the New Zealand Council and the mayors, and in my other roles as well. So if anyone had any questions, certainly happy to take any, but for now, just a very much a thank you, and exciting space. We're looking forward to the new year as a collective. So ngā mihi, kia ora.
Thank you for that, and I assume you move your paper. Yes, I'll second it by Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you.
No worries. Any questions? Yes.
Thanks, Meredith. I'm just, I note that you guys had a presentation from the Future of Local Government panel. Would you just be able to provide, I guess, what that might have been able to enlighten, I guess, for the rest of us, what the Future for Local Government panel envisages the future of local government might be?
I guess overall, because the role of Te Marawata is to provide and to, I guess, have more Māori representation in governance and in government, local particularly. Obviously, we've seen Māori wards be a key factor to that, but it's not the silver bullet in any means. So our meeting with them was really to get a little bit more of an understanding of what are some of the barriers that are there for Māori in respect to elections and campaigning. So there's a whole bunch of work being done to kind of rectify, I guess, some of the questions that a lot of people who do want to stand don't understand the process. So there's some wonderful work going to happen through our local government, New Zealand, but Te Marawata has really been engaged to, I guess, unpack some of the things that we as a local council have been, and I want to just pay tribute to our CE for the relationship. It's not easy with iwi, mana whenua, and all the work that is going on in that space. It's years and years of unpacking, I guess, the colonial colonisation and institutional racism that we know it's difficult to talk about. So our meeting with that panel is very much about sharing personal kind of views and our own. I guess those of us, like I'm a third term, so there are other councillors on Te Marawata who are fairly new to their role, first termers, second termers, and a longer termer councillor in Auckland. So it's really about sharing, I guess, how it has felt for us as individuals. There's a variety of conversations that come to the fore from that, but mostly sharing how we're kind of seeing the movement of change, the mood, the attitudes, and I guess the hope that for representation to be more equal and future thinking around our land, our relationship with our iwi partners and how we can better do that. So the panel have just been really really grateful for our input as a collective to sharing, again, personal stories, but also those feelings we get that are shared to us as individuals from constituents in iwi and mana whenua. So overall, very positive conversations about how do we create less barriers and more access and input to a role that we are all seeing is changing and I believe getting better in respect to it. But yeah, a lot of it is just overarching sharing the feeling and the moods and the challenges that are still faced by those wanting to stand in the local elections and what we can do to do better there. Thanks for your question, Kerry. Oh, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you for that. All in favour, contrary, carried. I declare the open part of our meeting closed and we will be moving